Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is, what if Naruto became the champion of the stars, and alien princesses fell in love with him? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. A tall man wearing what appeared to be an official's uniform asked as he faced a tall woman wearing a suit that was all white and having the logo of what appeared to be a shield with two dragons chasing each other around it behind a blue flame and three swords in the middle. The blonde woman who, while attractive, had a serious and focused facade as she read the data on what appeared to be a handheld computer pad. She didn't reply at first, but the man paid that no mind. As soon as she was done reading the reports, she faced the man who asked her the question. The project is progressing nicely, sir. We have had some initial problems with the neural programming, but it seems that some time and extra work was needed to fix the known errors in the systems. The biometal has been fully infused with the needed nanocomputers, nanoassemblers, neural network fibers, power core units, and power transmitters to begin the rest of the core programming. As of now, we merely need to install the last program package into the nanocomputer's main collective hard drive. We've also installed a variety of weapons to further boost combat functions and adaptability, so that will be a good edge as well for the project once the experiment is complete. Good. Exactly how many of the models are present? We only have at least 3 models. All 3 have the same level of abilities and systems. They will serve as the foundational test beds for the later models. What's the main power source for the models? Bioenergy, sir. Bioenergy. I was under the impression that we were using the main miniaturized fusion core system, just like the other combat models. Normally, sir, that would have been our choice, but we have decided to follow through some new breakthroughs in the medical research conducted before. We're using the old theory of bioenergy placed forward by Professor Deckard Reigns at least 10 years ago. Professor Deckard. Wasn't his theory on bioenergy supposed to be considered as the only failure he had in his career? Yes. But it has been discovered that he was correct. According to research, while the body does produce its own electrical power to run the basic organic functions, there is another more unique power source in the human body. This power can be accessed only high levels of mental and physical training and through several other methods, and the level of power is determined by one's physical condition and stamina, that is bioenergy. Through the mentioned methods, the bioenergy is rumored to be able to augment a person's physical abilities and can be used in a variety of ways that seems far-fetched at first, but possible indeed. Bioenergy has gone by many names over the years, and Deckard was able to record the names in his research, and we know many of them. Oh, some of the terms include ki, kai, the yin and yang, chakra, and many other terms that are too long to fully place on record. The bioenergy is also determined to exist as a near-invisible field around a person that can only be seen with special sensors. Normally a person has what we have determined a reserve of bioenergy, and since it is naturally grown energy and is able to be naturally replenished, this would be an ideal power source for the suits. Once the suits, built-in computer networks, determine the level of the wearer's bioenergy reserve levels, they will siphon amounts of that power with no side effects and store it throughout the suit in hidden micro-power reactor cores that were modified to house and use bioenergy to power the suits, and also, if needed, to improve key functions in the systems. The nano machines will also reconstruct the body in order to suit the needs of the suit and make its user a much stronger person to handle the demands of the suit. That would mean an increase of overall psychical traits such as muscle mass, stamina, height, metabolism, body functions, and more. In simple terms, the body is rebuilt internally to be at the peak of human perfection and ability. Interesting. What else are you planning on doing with the suits? We've been working on a new combat program that we've dubbed the Persona Drive System, or the PD system for short. How will that work? The female scientist ran through several holograms highlighting several bands of human soldiers in combat armor and then several other figures in combat scenarios and situations as she turned to a massive core display of information in what appeared to be some sort of massive data stream. Normally an AI program that is used to supplement a combat system computer relies on a key framework of information to serve as the basic foundation of the program. However, in the case of the Persona Drive system, the computer samples the psychological profile of its host user and then creates a combat program to suit the fighting potential and preference of the said host user. This program is then named as its combat persona, and that will determine the weapon loadout of the suit itself, custom tailored to suit the user's personality profile and the combat scenario. I see. Is it finished? Yes, we have installed the basic core functions of the PD system into the 3 suits and they will be ready in a few moments. The Persona Drive and the built-in AI computer will passive evaluate its user's opponents through scanning and determine the threat level of the foe. If the threat is minimal and no true danger to the user, then the suit will remain inactive. If the threat is considerable, then the suit will activate and protect the user and aid it in combat. If the threat is grave, then the suit will unlock some of the more lethal weapon systems to deal with the threat effectively. This way the suit will determine who are combatants and non-combatants. Will the suit be present? No. It will remain in the body unless activated either by conscious thought or by the PD system's automatic response modes. The suit will appear and then cover the user in the biometal. Until then, the person will appear normal. However, a massive sound was heard and then the entire room is shaking and then the lights began to dim. People milled around as doors opened and highly armed soldiers came rushing into the area, and they also had the same symbols on their apparent body armor, with one having rank bars on his armor. The man who had been talking to the scientist earlier spoke to the soldier. What the hell is going on? We're under attack, sir. How many? Unknown, but they are heading right for this room. My guess is that they're after the suits. The two people looked at one another and gave a dark look as the facility continued to shake and groan from the assault beyond the rooms. With that in mind, the man turned and gave a command to the rest of the staff. Have all data and prototype designs destroyed immediately. Prepare the teleportation grid system and send the suits back to high command. We cannot let decades of work fall in the hands of our enemies. And begin full evacuation. The people rushed to do what they could and began activating purging programs to all of their computer systems and data drives, and for the first time, the suits were revealed, but they were not towering suits of metal armor, but rather pure liquid, like a massive blob of deep black goo. The containers housed what appeared to containment fluid that kept the suits fully active and functioning, and the containers were now being taken towards what appeared to be a massive archway that quickly began to glow, and a massive semi-solid liquid mass that glowed appeared inside of it as the scientists began typing in coordinates into some sort of computer terminal. The containers were the first to be placed into the mass, and the containers were taken in by the gates system in a massive flash of light, but then the computer was suddenly hit by a powerful energy surge and the gates sparked brightly and began to behave erratically as well. The leader of the scientists spoke to the one who tried to figure out what had happened to the key system. What happened? Ma'am, the last attack has caused a massive power fluctuation in the teleportation system core. It's caused the teleport system to send the containers beyond the required coordinates to an unknown heading. In a clearing, Naruto yawned as he was sitting down near a tree and looking at the moon and stars as he and his team had left Wave Country after the defeat of Gato and his men. The blonde genin still felt sad about the deaths of both Zabuza and Haku and wondered about how things were going to turn out when they got back to Konoha. He looked at his team and there was Sakura chatting with the ever-silent Sasuke, and Kakashi was reading his book at the moment. He still considered Sasuke a bit of a show-off and a rival, but he was not that bad in a way, though he wished Sakura would look at him more favorably. Naruto then decided to take a walk. It would be at least another day and a half before they got to Konoha, and a walk could certainly help him. I'll go for a walk and I'll be back. Kakashi looked up from his book and replied. Be careful and don't get lost, Naruto. Got it. Better do what Kakashi said, Naruto. You do get lost and it would be a pain to look for you in the dark. Naruto gave Sasuke a glare and snorted while Sasuke gave back a glare as well, and the two genin turned their faces and Naruto walked away. This made Sakura look at her two teammates with a bit of confusion, and she hoped that there would be no incident between them. Naruto walked into the forest and began to think about a few things that could give him the edge over Sasuke and show the Uchiha prodigy that he was not some doby, and galled him when Sasuke would insult him at times. However, he did admit that when the time came for him to learn some new jutsu, it would really give Sasuke the shock of his life. Naruto's thoughts, however, were suddenly broken as a massive blinding flash of light appeared right in front of him, and a massive wave of heat and force knocked him down. The force wave had shattered the silence of the night, and the entire area shook with enough force to make even a large number of bunched exploding tags going up all at once sound like a weak firecracker going off. Amazingly enough, the heat was not strong enough to char or burn him, so he was safe. What the heck? Naruto gasped and thought for a second that he stumbled into an ambush, and as soon as he was able to move, he got up and tried to look about, and then his eyes were directed towards some sort of crater there in the ground. he crawled slowly towards it and then took out a kunai and stood up, ready to fight if it came to that. However, there was no sign of anything threatening at the moment, and Naruto looked into the crater and then spotted something. What the heck was that Kakashi sense? Sakura asked as she, Sasuke, and Kakashi walked towards where Naruto had gone, and they needed to find out what that massive wave of light, heat and force was. I'm not so sure, Sakura. But be ready for anything. The Jonin took out a kunai and they moved forward. They stopped when they spotted Naruto walking towards them, and to their surprise, he was virtually unharmed and he seemed to have something in his hands. Naruto. The blonde ninja smiled as he presented the container before his team. Look what I found, guys. This is one really weird container. The container was quite off with strange markings and words that were totally alien to the Genin team, and they were curious as to what was going as they approached the blonde. Sasuke was the first to speak. What the heck happened to you? And where did that come from? Naruto told them about what had happened with the flash of light and then his finding the container in a crater with the ground being turned into glass. Naruto, however, was unaware of the fact that the container was armed with a special device that required a user to place his hand on the small panel, and then Naruto's finger was right on top. A small needle came out and then the container glowed white. Ow! Naruto felt a short stab of pain on his hand and reflexively dropped the container, which amazingly enough did not break even after falling hard on a rock. The group watched as a red spot was seen in the container due to the light, and then the red spot was somehow absorbed by the black liquid, and then the container seemed to open and out flowed the fluid and left behind the black goo that burst out and landed on the ground. Naruto was curious and reached out to it. No, Naruto. Don't. Kakashi's warning came too late as the liquid suddenly reared back as if it was alive, startling the group with its sudden life-like action. They then saw a strange light appear in the black liquid and it directed the light on Naruto, and the light lasted for a brief second and then Naruto could only look as something about the light was holding him in place. Kakashi and the others in Naruto's team watched in shock and horror as the deep black liquid that burst out from the unknown object suddenly leapt outward and slammed right into Naruto and then began to cover Naruto, almost as if it was truly alive. Naruto struggled desperately to stop the thing, but his attempts were met with failure as the liquid covered his body with terrifying speed. He looked to his team and shouted out, "Help me! Get this stuff off of me!" Kakashi rushed in and tried to help Naruto, but to his shock the liquid began to seep into Naruto, though his clothes and seemed to go into his skin, while some more of the liquid rushed up to Naruto's entire face and covered it briefly and then began to seep through his skin, and go through his eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. In less than a few seconds after being covered by the liquid, Naruto was standing there and Kakashi caught him as he fell to the ground. Naruto, are you all right? Naruto turned and looked at Kakashi and replied, I feel weird, like there's something inside me. That was all Naruto said as he suddenly lapsed into unconsciousness. Naruto. Later, Kakashi checked Naruto as the genin slept on the bed roll that he had been placed on. It had been very harrowing for the whole genin team ever since that black liquid had somehow entered Naruto's body. Something was going on and the jonin had no idea as to what could be happening before him. When he checked on Naruto after he fell unconscious, he was relieved that Naruto was still able to breathe and his pulse was steady, and he had a heartbeat at the moment. But he was out cold for the past hour or so and his temperature would routinely spike once in a while as if in a fever of sorts. Kakashi then took a look at the bag Naruto had, which held the strange container that housed the liquid previously. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before, and that liquid goo, what was it? Some sort of creature. Sasuke arrived on the scene and brought some container carrying some cold spring water and some towels, and then he sat down next to Sakura, who had been given the task to watch over Naruto as she washed the blonde's head, which was bare of his forehead protector band. The blonde ninja would routinely moan in pain and become feverish, and this was a concern. As she wiped his forehead and wringed out the water, the pink-haired Kunoichi turned to Sasuke and spoke. What was that thing, Sasuke-kun? I wish I knew. I've never seen anything like that in my life. Nothing in the academy books mentioned anything like that. Sakura then turned to Kakashi and spoke. Do you have any idea about that stuff, Kakashi-sensei? The jonin shook his head. I don't, Sakura, but whatever the case, Naruto is not dead and amazingly unharmed despite the spikes in his temperature and the moans of pain, but this has to be placed under secrecy. Once we get back to Konoha, I'll have a few words with the Hokage and see if we can track down what that mysterious gunk was. Unknown to them, Inside Naruto's body, at this very moment, machines so tiny were flooding his body and soon began to settle into his body, cell by cell, and soon, the strange things began to move. Kakashi was carrying Naruto on his back as he and the rest of the Team 7 arrived in Konoha, at the moment. The blonde genin was still unconscious and unresponsive to any form of stimulus that he and the others had administered. Even the smell of ramen that they had prepared from his pack did little to wake him up. It seemed that whatever the gunk had done to him was very effective in keeping Naruto completely comatose. The group arrived at the gate and the Jonin quickly made his way to the hospital while sending Sakura to the Hokage tower to call on the Hokage. As soon as he arrived into the hospital, he issued orders to the medic Nin and the nurses to ready a room for Naruto, and as soon as he was told that the room was ready, he took the blonde into the room and decided to wait and let the medic Nins do the examination. He then waited in the hallway outside of the bedroom and waited for the results of the medic Nin's examination of the blonde ninja while he looked at the bag he had with him at the moment, which still held the odd container that Naruto had been holding that housed the gunk that had attacked Naruto. The Jonin sighed and wondered just what was going on. Despite his aloof nature, Kakashi was worried about the whole event and didn't do the usual and read his favorite book like he normally did. He then turned to see none other than the Hokage and several Anbu arrive on the scene, and also Iruka, along with Sakura and Sasuke. The elderly leader of the village then spoke to the Jonin. What happened at Wave Country Kakashi that sent Naruto in a coma? The Jonin could tell that the very same question was on Iruka's mind as well as the Chunin was worried. He had just been in a class and was there with the Hokage to deliver the usual academic reports when Sakura came into the room and blurted out that Naruto was in the hospital in a coma. That got the Chunin worried and the Hokage as well. We had finished the mission and were camping out in the forest before we made it back to Konoha, but Naruto went for a walk. It seemed normal when a massive wave of force, light, and heat came out of nowhere. At first we thought it was an ambush, but there was no follow-up attack. Sakura, myself, and Sasuke moved to see what had happened when Naruto returned and was carrying this. The Jonin then took out the container and showed it to the group, and since it was apparently inactive, he was relieved not to suffer the brief pain that Naruto felt. The group looked at the container with a curious and wary eye. Even though they had seen it already, the two genin who were Naruto's teammates were wary of the thing. This thing was some sort of container, that some sort of black gunk that was suspended in it. We looked at it when it suddenly glowed white and Naruto released it in pain as if something had bitten him. The container released the fluid inside of it and then this black gunk came out and Naruto tried to touch it despite my warning, but then it reared back as if it was alive and then fired a beam at Naruto, and when the light faded, it leapt at Naruto and covered him. He tried to rip it off and called for help. I tried to reach him but the gunk seemed to seep right into his skin. And before anything could be done, it was inside Naruto. I have no idea what that thing was, but there is one thing I can be sure of: it's not like anything I have seen before. The Hokage thought about that fact and then took the container and looked at it carefully, and he couldn't help but see that it was not like any container he was aware of. It has strange symbols on it and there seemed to be an array of other things on it that made no sense to the old man. He had lived for along them and this was the absolute first time he had seen anything like this in his years, both as the third Hokage before and when he was reinstated as Hokage after the death of the fourth. I have to admit, there is nothing like this in my mind either. It was then that the medic Nins came out. Excuse me, but it seems that Naruto has awakened. The group entered and sure enough, Naruto was indeed awake and was looking somewhat confused at the moment, and he then spoke. Hey, where are we? What happened? Kakashi was the first to speak to Naruto. Are you all right? Naruto thought about that question and replied as best he could. Yeah, I feel fine, Kakashi-sensei. I little weak for some reason but still alive. What happened last night? All I remember was that black stuff covering me and then this feeling of something inside me. The minute Naruto recalled that, he looked all over himself and began to panic as his memories came back to him. What the heck happened to me? Is that stuff inside me? Get it out. Get it out. The group saw that Naruto was in a panic and Iruka stepped forward to try and calm his student. He reached for Naruto and spoke to him in the best way he knew how. Naruto, get a grip and calm down. Naruto struggled a bit, and that was when he lashed out with his fist towards a nearby wall, and to the shock of just about everyone in the room, and the building for that matter, the light punch created a melon-sized crater on the wall and shook the building a little. The impact had even made some of the plaster fall clear off the wall along with several fragments of concrete. The whole group, including Naruto, were stunned at the sight, and Naruto calmed down and looked at his hand, and to his shock, his hand seemed totally unharmed, not even a feeling of pain in the least as he moved his hand back. In all his life, he never had the level of strength to do that to a wall of solid concrete. He spoke slowly. I did that. The jaws of Sakura and Sasuke dropped at the sight of Naruto's sudden increase of overall strength, and even Iruka was shocked, along with the Hokage and the Anbu as well. The Hokage then spoke to Naruto. Naruto, look at me and tell me, do you feel any different? Naruto recovered and spoke to the Hokage. I don't know, the pain's beginning to fade away, I think. I feel fine, though I am really hungry. The Hokage thought it over and then turned to the medic nins. I want a blood sample analysis done immediately. Yes, Hokage-sama. Naruto was not a big fan of needles, and the sight of one was not something he liked to see at the moment, but he decided not to react as he might injure someone with his sudden increase of strength. He gave a slight wince as the needle pierced his skin, and a sample of his blood was taken by the medic nins, and he was then given a thorough checkup by the ninjas as the others watched. As soon as the tests were done and the blood sample taken away for analysis, the Hokage allowed Naruto to be released, and Iruka volunteered to take Naruto out to have his meal, and Naruto was happy, the episode forgotten as he was truly hungry for ramen. As they left, the others in the room, including the Anbu, looked at the damage Naruto had done, and they had to admit that Naruto's sudden increase of strength was certainly something worth looking at to find out just how it had occurred. Kakashi himself decided to take a breather from the situation and took out his book and then left the room, just as the Hokage and his Anbu escorts decided to go with the medic nin to determine just what was going on with Naruto and if the incident with the gunk that Kakashi spoke of had any connection to Naruto's increased abilities. However, Sakura and Sasuke looked at the crater Naruto made, and Sakura was the first to speak. How was Naruto able to do that? He was never that strong when we started out on this mission. I'm not sure, Sakura. Sasuke looked at the crater intently and thought to himself. Something is going on here. That black liquid had something to do with all this, but what was it? In the Ichiraku ramen stand. Man, that felt great. I am so hungry after that mission. Iruka was happy that he had managed to get an increase in his salary as a Chunin teacher in the academy, as Naruto was gulping down the ramen, even faster than usual, which was hard to believe at the moment. He had no idea that Naruto was this hungry. Even Chuki and Ayame were surprised as their favorite customer was eating enough ramen to feed a small platoon of ninjas, as the bowls kept on piling on the stand's table area, and Iruka had only 3 bowls of his own. Naruto guzzled down the newest bowl like there was no tomorrow, and as soon as he was done in only a few moments with the current bowl, that was added to the pile of bowls numbering at least 45 bowls, a new record in the eyes of the group watching Naruto. The blonde ninja then stopped and gave an explosive breath and a sigh of utter bliss. Oh man, that really hit the spot. Wow, that's a new world record. Usually you've only reached 40 bowls of ramen. Now you've gone and did 46. You must have been really hungry, Naruto. Naruto nodded at Chuki and smiled. Yeah, old man, that was some treat. Thanks for the meals. He then gave a grin to Iruka and spoke. Thanks a load, Iruka-sensei, for the lunch. I really needed that after not having breakfast or dinner. Iruka smiled, and the two decided to take some time to talk about the mission after bidding Chuki and Ayame farewell for the time being, and Naruto was finally able to feel better, though he hoped that he would be able to have enough money to buy dinner, and he was really feeling different, at least in a small way, as he would sometimes feel a slight spike in his body temperature, but it was not painful or harmful, just a hot flash, and it would disappear quickly as well. As the day wore on, Naruto went to his apartment and went inside and prepared some food, and after finishing yet another large amount of food for dinner, the blonde decided to go straight to sleep, hoping that the things that happened would straighten itself out and he might be able to get things cleared out in his head. Unknown to him, the Hokage was talking to Kakashi and Iruka with the results of the medical tests conducted by the medic nin on the blood sample that was taken from him the day before. Are you saying that the liquid placed objects into Naruto's cells? Iruka was shocked by the announcement, as he had been called in the tower by the Hokage, being Naruto's guardian and unofficial brother figure in Konoha. The Jonin Kakashi was also called in as well, being Naruto's Jonin sensei. He deserved to hear the information that the medic nins have uncovered about Naruto. Yes, Apparently the medic nins had determined that the blood cells that they have acquired from Naruto for study showed through the microscopes that the blood cells appear to have been fused with some sort of device. A device? What sort of device? They do not know Iruka. It's unlike anything we have on record. The medic nins have searched their archives for any mention of the odd devices, but there is no mention of them and they are so tiny that the medic nins almost missed them. There are billions of them in the blood sample and they seem to be totally different from any cell types in the medical texts. If that is true, then we have to assume that Naruto's entire body and cells have these devices in them. Hokage-sama, are you saying that there are billions of these unknown objects in Naruto's body cells? Yes, but that is not all. The medic nins checked the chakra levels of the blood sample and they were astonished, because these new devices in Naruto's bloodstream have condensed a massive reserve of chakra into itself. Each of these devices seem to siphon and store chakra and just one of those devices has more than enough chakra to rival a room full of jonin. Iruka and Kakashi were stunned by the news. If Naruto's lone blood sample showed that one of these devices had enough chakra to dwarf even a handful of jonin and their own chakra reserves, if that was the case. Hokage-sama, does that mean that Naruto? The Hokage nodded and replied. If this is true and one drop of Naruto's blood has billions of these devices, then this would mean that Naruto's chakra reserves would equal that of the Kyuubi itself, and that is just his normal chakra. If these devices were able to store the Kyuubi's own chakra in the same fashion and in vast quantities no less, then Naruto would be termed as a living spring of pure chakra. In this case it seems that even without the Kyuubi's chakra fully manifesting on him, Naruto's chakra reserve is nearly 100 times more than the entire ninja forces in Konoha alone, including the Anbu ranks. Naruto's chakra reserves outshine everyone here in Konoha, making him more than capable to outlasting even the Kakashi and Iruka could only look as the meaning seeped into them, considering that, they were surprised that Naruto had not died from the massive waves of chakra that was inside of them. If Naruto used a jutsu, any jutsu for that matter, the jutsu would be increased to the point that the jutsu would be unbelievably powerful. Kakashi then spoke out on his thought on the matter. This is unexpected, Hokage-sama, what do you suggest we do? The Hokage thought over what they should do at the moment and then he replied. We can't do anything. So far the devices in Naruto do not seem to have a negative effect on him, but we must make sure that we get as much information we can on what this will mean for Naruto in particular. I will give orders for the medic nins to seal away all the information they had gathered on these devices. In the meantime I want both of you to make sure that Naruto is safe and unharmed, and Kakashi. Yes. I want you to personally inform both Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha that there will be no mention of what had transpired in Wave Country until all information on that liquid you described and the devices in Naruto has been gained. We must make sure that no one else will know about this event until we know more. Understood. Yes, Hokage-sama. Kakashi then spoke out. Hokage-sama, may I speak? Go ahead, Kakashi. What is it you are suggesting? Unknown to them, deep in Naruto's body, there was something even more fantastic happening to the blonde ninja. Deep in Naruto's body a special device was nearing completion as billions of nano machines were in the process of creating the said device. The device resembled something of a piece of flesh that quickly integrated into Naruto's body and was easily now part of Naruto's body, but it was actually a small data core as the device began to power up and began running its core systems and running diagnostics. System booting. // Data drives complete. Downloading combat system parameters. Scanning host DNA and physical data. Host data scanning and compilation complete. Persona drive system active. Installing key system and core components. Host DNA scanning complete. DNA scan shows 100 genetic manipulation potential. Host physical data shows high compatibility with system. However, considerable physical upgrades are needed to increase physical condition to harness full combat potential. Persona drive system scan and combat persona program construction complete. Subject shows increased aptitude with close hand-to-hand combat and close weapon combat, considerable aptitude in long-range warfare. High level of personal agility, balanced hand and eye coordination, and dexterity, balanced strength, high level of stamina, good overall endurance, exceptional healing factor, and average intelligence levels. Combat potential is considerable and very adaptable. // Warning. Unknown entity located. Scanning. Massive amounts of bioenergy located. Possible threat to host or possible ally. assembling security protocols to main and sub-data core drives and personality matrix of user. Initiate biological enhancement and growth program. All nanomachine colonies beginning biological enhancement procedures to host to improve overall physical abilities and traits. Begin biometal fusion procedure and system box construction, and begin neural and nerve system enhancement programs. Naruto was fully asleep, unaware that lines of glowing energy began to manifest all over his body as the nanomachines began to do their work in enhancing him for the procedure as the biometal continued to fuse into the lines as the black liquid returned and fused into the lines of glowing energy. Naruto groaned occasionally, unaware that his biology was being altered to adapt it to the biometal and the combat suit itself. Had he been awake, he'd had been horrified to see that his body was actually growing. The blonde, however, was being kept asleep as the nanomachines kept him asleep and used special chemicals to make him produce his own endorphins to dull his pain, making Naruto unaware of what was happening to him at this very moment. The next day. Oh man, what a night. I feel like I've run a marathon training regime. Naruto yawned and got off the bed and was feeling rather different at the moment as he moved and scratched the back of his head and headed for the bathroom of his apartment. However, he noted that his clothes seemed tighter and a bit more form-fitting than normal. He didn't want to admit it since these were his favorite pajamas, but he felt that now was the time for him to consider buying new clothes. As he entered the bathroom, he grabbed a glass of water and drank the cool drink and opened his eyes and looked at himself in the mirror, and looked a lot more closely. The people who were a fair distance from the apartment Naruto lived in were minding their own business and doing their usual daily routines. But that was brought to a sudden halt as a scream tore through the apartment. Ow ugh g g g g g g g h h h h h h h h h h h. In the bathroom. What the heck happened to me? Naruto thought to himself as he looked at his face in the mirror. Gone was the baby fat of youth. He looked harder, more angular and well defined. His skin had a light tan complexion and he saw that the whisker marks were there as well, but more wavy and seemed more like birth marks as well. He felt his hair and felt it being thicker and more silky for some reason, more like silk than rough straw at times. The blonde then noted that his hair had a much deeper golden color, and his eyes were deep blue. They usually were deep blue, but his eyes now had a much deeper shade of blue, almost like blue sapphires. He was looking more mature and older, almost as if he had aged 3 or 4 years his real age. He then saw that he had grown as well. He took off his clothes, but to his shock, his strength from yesterday had somehow grown and his pajamas were torn off of him easily, and while he was shocked by his new facial features, he was even more shocked to find himself much taller than before. His original height was 5 feet 4, but now he was a lot taller, almost 6 feet 1, and boy was he different. Gone was his old body build as a 12-year-old adolescent. He had the body of a highly trained 18-year-old athlete. There was no sign of fat anywhere, only pure muscle and strength. However, Naruto could see that his body was much more around the build of a combination of a bodybuilder and athlete, the pinnacle of human body perfection. Broad chest, strong shoulders, flat but well-formed stomach and more. Naruto turned his body in the mirror and was greeted with the sight of his male form being well proportioned in every fashion, and he couldn't help but notice that his boxers were already too tight for him, and when he looked at his package, he blushed bright red as he realized that he was packing quite the set, and he couldn't help but speak. What the heck happened to me? Plus, Naruto then noted that his voice had also changed. He had the deeper, more masculine voice of a much older man. He realized that he had literally grown overnight, and he could help but wonder what this could mean for him in the long run. It was then that he decided to try and see just what his trademark sexy no jutsu, and see if the jutsu had also suffered some changes like he did this morning. Sexy no jutsu. He then looked at the mirror in the bathroom, and all of a sudden, he felt a great shock run through his mind and he shouted yet again. Oh my god. His sexy no jutsu form was shocking to say the very least, not in a bad way, but in a drop-dead way. His sexy no jutsu form had the body that would no doubt give men nosebleeds and more, as the female form he took was sensually formed and had all the right curves and swells and the sinfully perfect form that most men would have cheerfully committed murder to hold in their sleep. And the height was the same as his own natural height. There were muscles there as well, but not bulky, and were perfectly melded with the body, showing the full power of a woman, and well, they were certainly more than ample to the touch. And the deep blonde hair on the sexy no jutsu was long and very silky, certainly a long lush tail of gold silk. His sexy no jutsu form was certainly upgraded down to the last detail, plus My god, what the heck happened to me? Did I eat something overnight? Or, could it be that black gunk? It did this to me. Naruto released the jutsu and was back to his old self. He didn't know what that gunk had done to him but decided he might as well get some answers from the people he knew could provide them. But he was not going to go there buckin' with that in mind. He moved out of the bathroom and headed to a nearby closet. When he was young, he had accidentally bought a large number of clothes that he didn't need. Those were too large for him and he had thought about either throwing them away or using them as rags. But now he was happy that he didn't toss them aside. He opened the closet and tried to find the clothes he needed to wear, and thankfully found them. He wore the clothes which comprised of a deep black muscle shirt, a orange and black jacket that was in some ways the same as his previous clothes and had a woven vest with pockets with the Konoha symbol behind the vest. With the jacket and shirt was a pair of pants that was in the same color scheme as the jacket, in orange and black. The pants thankfully were able to fit and he found a good pair of boxers to fit on him, and a pair of black sandals that fit his clothes. He reached for his forehead protector and then tied it on his head and quickly left his apartment and headed right for the Hokage Tower. In a nearby bridge, Sasuke stood there nonchalantly as Sakura began to pace back and forth. She had been hoping that Kakashi would arrive and tell them what the next mission was going to be, though she rather doubted that there would be any missions at the moment with Naruto still in an unknown condition. She wondered just what had happened as she recalled seeing that dark liquid engulf and enter Naruto's body right in front of her. He seemed fully recovered at the hospital and had eaten up a storm in the ramen stand he was known to be easily found in, but seeing him throw that wild punch and make a crater in the wall was also in her mind. The same could be said for Sasuke as despite his apparently uninterested posture he was deep in thought on what he had seen the blonde do back in the hospital. But for now he had no idea what was going on at the moment. He had searched his family's archives in the old Uchiha estate but turned up nothing on what that material was that apparently gave Naruto super strength. He wanted to know what it was at the moment but without any leads he gave up the search, and while he had no hope of Naruto really giving him a straight answer, he hoped the blonde had some idea as to what was that stuff. Where is Kakashi-sensei? Sakura-chan. Sakura sighed as he recognized the voice and stopped her pacing. Geez, at least he's back on his feet. Though, when did Naruto's voice become deeper? Oh well, might as well see what he wants. Don't shout. Huh. Sakura gasped as she looked at who was coming their way, but instead of her teammate Naruto, the one coming before her was a tall teenage blonde hunk who was dressed in black and orange and was well built. Really well built, considering how the clothes hugged his frame and made him look even hotter. The whisker marks on his cheeks made him look more animalistic, in a very hot sort of way. His hair was deep golden blonde, like gold silk. It was shocking to say the very least. And the eyes, they were like a combination of deep ocean blue and sky blue. In Sakura's mind, he was hot. Sakura-chan, are you all right? Your face is all red. Sakura's face was deep red, so red in fact she would not have been surprised if her face resembled a tomato at this point and time. She managed to recover and get her voice back as she tried to speak, but she couldn't help but stare at the blonde hottie before her at the moment. He's so handsome, but how does he know my name? And why does he sound and look vaguely familiar? He's wearing a Konoha forehead protector but I don't recall ever meeting him. Inner Sakura however had other ideas on what to describe the blonde god before her. Handsome doesn't cut it, girl. He's smoking hot. Man, I wonder what size he is underneath, or how hard are those muscles. Shut up. Sakura gulped and then spoke. Excuse me, but do I know you? Naruto gave an incredulous look and slapped his forehead and replied. Please Sakura-chan, don't say that, it's me Naruto. Sakura looked at him and then began to recognize Naruto, and she couldn't help but feel as if Naruto had played a trick on her, and she walked up to him and then used the hand sign and spoke. Kai. As soon as Sakura opened her eyes and got ready to beat Naruto to the ground for that dirty trick, her eyes widened as her teammate was still in that form. What kind of henge is this? Sakura-chan, this is not henge. It's really me. Sakura studied Naruto and walked around him, and despite her best intentions she couldn't help but notice Naruto's muscles, and she found herself staring at his well-shaped posterior. As soon as she was done with her examination, she reached out and pinched Naruto's face and found that this really was Naruto. She backed away and spoke in shock. What the heck happened to you, Naruto? I think that gunk from yesterday did this to me. I recall waking up and then I saw myself in the mirror and I am like this. Are you sure? I'm positive, Sakura-chan. I have absolutely no idea what happened and what made me into this, but I know that Gunk was the one responsible. I had to salvage some old clothes because my old ones don't fit me anymore. Sasuke then stepped forward. His nonchalant expression gone and his face was full of shock at the sight before him. This cannot be Naruto before him. No one could possibly grow like this overnight. Hey Dobi, are you suggesting that the black Gunk we saw did this to you? Quit calling me Dobi, Sasuke. And yes, unless you two can come up with a better explanation for this. It was then that another voice came on the scene. Well now, this is unexpected. Is that really you, Naruto? The three turned and there was none other than Kakashi himself, who was looking with some surprise at Naruto at the moment. The Jonin wondered if there were some other side effects of the Gunk being inside Naruto, and apparently this was one of them. As he stood before Naruto, who was now only half a head taller than he was, he couldn't help but smirk at the sight of Naruto and spoke. Nice looks, Naruto. You're going to be winning ladies' hearts pretty easily at the moment. Kakashi-sensei, this isn't funny. Do you or the Hokage had any idea what that Gunk was? The Jonin shook his head and then replied. I'm afraid not, Naruto. The Hokage has been looking for any form of information on that black Gunk. But I'm afraid he's gotten nothing at this point and time, so I'm afraid I can't help you at this point and time, but be assured that we're going to do what we can to find the needed answers on what that black Gunk was. Until then, there's not much that can be done. Naruto felt depression set in and his shoulders slumped. Darn it. Oh well, I might as well make the most of this mess. Don't worry, Naruto. From the looks of things at the moment, you might actually benefit from that black Gunk. It certainly hasn't killed you. Naruto looked at Kakashi and had to admit that the Jonin did have a point, and after seeing Sakura give him love-struck eyes the moment she saw him made his feel a lot better. Not to mention he felt as if he was at his full zenith of power, as if he had more than enough power to beat anyone he faced at the moment. And when he recalled the incident with the hospital wall. You might be right. Oh man, this so cool. Man, I can't wait to grab break fast. One see you. Kakashi and the others looked on, and then as soon as Naruto was out of sight, Kakashi turned to the two genin who were Naruto's teammates and he spoke seriously. We've got something to discuss, you two. The Jonin reported to both Sakura and Sasuke the findings of the medic Nin and what the Hokage's orders on the incident. Naturally, the discovery that their teammate Naruto had cell-sized devices all over his body that gave him unique powers and physical abilities was shocking, but when they found out about Naruto's reserve of chakra, they were stunned to the core. Naruto has that much chakra. But that's impossible, Kakashi-sensei. I have to agree with Sakura. Kakashi. There's no way anyone living could have that much chakra in them and still be alive. That much power would kill them. The Jonin knew that their reactions were expected. Even though he didn't show it, he admitted that discovering the amount of chakra in Naruto was shocking to him as well. But there was no hiding the truth as well. The evidence was right there before them, and denying it was not going to change the facts either. True, but the devices in Naruto's body have somehow condensed pockets of chakra from him and enhanced them to very potent levels. Even if it sounds impossible, Naruto is alive and he does have that level of chakra at the moment. I didn't want to believe it either, but the medic Nin were not fooling around when they scanned the blood sample taken from Naruto yesterday morning. Sakura and Sasuke couldn't believe it at all, but they could do nothing as Kakashi bid them farewell as he had some things to discuss further with the Hokage. As soon as the Jonin left, Sasuke turned and decided to leave. He had a lot to think about at the moment. That left Sakura alone, and she decided to take a short walk and do some thinking about what she had just learned and witnessed at the moment. Naruto arrived at the Ichiraku ramen stand and then sat down as Tsuki and Ayame arrived, and then the very second Ayame got to see Naruto she blushed bright red and spoke in a very embarrassed voice. Hello there, sir. Welcome to the Ichiraku ramen stand. What would you like to have today? Naruto smiled and replied. Just my usual, Ayame-san. Ayame gasped and wondered why this handsome young man spoke to her as if he knew her. She had never met him before, though it was strange that he looked vaguely familiar to her for some reason. Tsuki then spoke. Excuse me, sir, but I don't recall ever seeing you around here, and I've known every customer that comes by our stall. Who exactly are you? Nice to meet you, old man. It's me, Naruto. Tsuki and Ayame was surprised, and both of them leaned forward to look at Naruto more closely, and it was then that they finally recognized the well-built, and attractive blonde ninja. Chuki smiled warmly and spoke. My goodness Naruto-kun, look at yourself. You've grown. I'll get your favorite orders right now. The father of Ayame cooked the usual for their favorite customer and Ayame couldn't help but feel her face flush at how attractive Naruto was at the moment, and she was not the only one, as several passing female villagers, both young and old, noted the handsome blonde ninja and began to stare shamelessly at the blonde ninja as Naruto thanked Chuki for the ramen and began to eat his fill, and in a few moments, Naruto gave a whoop of happiness as he downed the bowls of ramen that Chuki handed to him and given to him by the smiling and naturally blushing Ayame. As soon as Naruto finished his breakfast, he bid Ayame and Chuki farewell and left the area. Ayame was blushing when her father saw that and grinned at that as well and spoke to her slyly. You like Naruto-kun, don't you? He's certainly grown, and I won't mind you two doing the mattress dance, though I suggest you two be careful, now isn't the right time to start a family. Father. In another part of Konoha, Sakura was worried as she looked at Konohamaru being held by a rough and tough-looking boy dressed in black and wearing decorative paint on his face and a strange wrapped package on his back. The young grandson of the Hokage had been playing with his friends Udon and Moegi when he had run into the stranger. The stranger gave a glare at Konohamaru, who was struggling as the moment in his grip. Let me go, you darn jerk. Please release him. He's only a kid. Sorry. No can do. This brat hit me and now I am going to even the score. Sakura had no idea what to do at the moment. She had been walking and was busy thinking about how she would act around Naruto after his sudden physical growth spurt, and it was then that she saw the incident, and after recognizing Konohamaru she quickly decided to get over there and stop what might happen and hopefully figure out the identity of the new arrivals at the moment. Another person was a female ninja who carried a massive metal object that resembled a case of some sort, and she was dressed in a totally different fashion than her companion and wore a clip-on dress, and she wore some sort of forehead protector on her neck like a necklace, and she had her hair in 4 short ponytails. She seemed to be unhappy with her companion's actions as well. She's got a point. There's no need to be picking on a kid at this point and time. Not this time. This will be quick. Sakura had no idea what to do. She could tell that the two were skilled genin, and it was then that she recognized the symbols they had. They were ninja from the land of Wind village known as Suna, recent allies of Konoha. What the heck is going on here? Sakura turned, and there was none other than Sasuke, who was carrying a pebble of sorts. Sasuke-kun. We need help. Konohamaru is going to get hurt. Sasuke nodded and then turned to face the stranger and spoke. Let the young one go. No. The blonde female ninja looked at Sasuke and smirked. The local cutie is here. Before the situation could get any worse and Sasuke could move, a fast blur of movement was sensed by everyone, and then there was another person near the stranger, and the ninja that had Konohamaru in his grip shouted in pain, and to the eyes of everyone in the area, there was someone who gripped his arm that held Konohamaru. The stranger turned and saw the hand that gripped his own in a very tight vice that threatened to break his bones, and there was Naruto, who gave a hard glare at him. The blonde genin had been on a run when he sensed the danger, though how he did so was still unknown to even him, but Naruto didn't care as he added some more pressure to his grip. Let go of Konohamaru before I crush your arm. The stranger gritted his teeth and glared at Naruto, forcing Naruto to increase his grip a bit, but that was enough to force the stranger to release Konohamaru. The young boy landed unceremoniously on the ground, but he didn't care as he turned and gave a shout of recognition. Boss. Naruto turned and smiled at Konohamaru and spoke to his friend and rival for the place of Hokage. You all right? Just fine, boss. Glad you made it, and damn, you look great. Moegi looked at Naruto and hearts appeared in her eyes as she looked at Naruto. She was not the only one, as the blonde companion turned and gasped with a fierce blush when she looked at the blonde ninja who had gripped the arm of her companion. Wow. This blonde guy is hot. Naruto then released the person and allowed Konohamaru to get up and get near his friends, and he then turned to face the stranger. Naruto turned a bit and with a negligent swipe of his hand on a nearby large tree, and the impact of his hand on the tree made a loud roar, and there on the tree was a massive half-hole that was made when Naruto's hand struck the tree hard. The sight was enough to make the strange-dressed young man back away as he held his still aching hand, while the blonde Kunoichi couldn't help but stare at Naruto with awe and an even fiercer blush. Wow. That blonde babe is very strong. You've got some guts manhandling my friend Konohamaru like that. Naruto cracked his knuckles and then moved his head to the sides to loosen his neck and gave a glare at the stranger and spoke once more. So before I beat the holy hell out of you, I want to know the name I have to give the medic nins when they retrieve your battered carcass. The stranger glared and replied as he reached behind him and grabbed the bundle behind him as he moved back and got ready to fight. I'm not going to give my name to you, punk. I am going to beat the hell out of you. The blonde female ninja gave a look of shock and spoke quickly to her companion. Have you lost your mind? You're using Kurisu here of all places. Naruto tensed up as the PD system kicked in and began to scan the person before its host, user and unknown to Naruto. The biocomputer was already evaluating the one before him and determining the level of threat he was to its master. Threat identified. Scanning. Threat level determined as mid-class, less than considerable, level 1 weapon system selected, default non-lethal payload selected, low-level defensive options selected. However, before things could get interesting, another voice came out of the blue. Kankuro, what on earth are you doing? The minute the voice was heard, the strangely dressed ninja gulped and his once fierce facade was lost as he turned and there was someone near the tree, upside down as well. Everyone else looked at the new arrival and saw that it was a red-haired boy who was dressed various shades of dark and light brown and had some sort of gourd on his back, with the gourd being made of sand, and a strange mark in his head. Naruto turned and looked at the new arrival, as the Persona Drive system scanned the new arrival. Possible threat identified. Scanning. Possible threat level to host. Scanned as above considerable. Possible need to activate full bio armor functions and custom weapon loadout of combat persona. The new arrival glared at Kankuro, who appeared to be rather nervous and scared of the new arrival in the area. That made Naruto wonder just who the new arrival was, and the same thought was with Sakura, Sasuke, Moegi, Udon, and Konohamaru as well. The stranger then spoke to the one named Kankuro. I asked you a question, Kankuro. Answer me. Sorry about that, Gaara. It was this kid's fault. The brat ran into me and then, well, you can see the results. So I see, but you realize that you're making a laughingstock of yourself and the village by picking on the kid. Well, I was. Never mind. I don't want to hear it at all. Be lucky that we're supposed to be meeting Baki-sensei later and therefore time is important to us at the moment. If that wasn't the case, I'd kill you right now. Don't let this happen again. Kankuro gulped and nodded. I got it. I went out of line, Gaara. Naruto didn't like what he was sensing from this Gaara kid but decided to relax himself as Gaara spoke once more to him and the others. I'm sorry for the trouble my brother might have caused. Naruto looked at them and it was then that the one known as Gaara turned to his companions and spoke seriously. Come on, you two. We've wasted enough time here. Baki-sensei might already be looking for us. Sakura, however, spoke quickly and wanted answers from the trio, as she knew that despite the fact that the Land of Fire and the Land of Wind being allies and their villages being allies as well, they were not allowed to be in the village unless they had a good reason. Hold it. I know you are ninja from the village of Suna in the Land of Wind. While it is true that you are allies of Konoha in a treaty, you three are not allowed here unless you have a special reason, so why are you three here? The blonde ninja replied. Have you really no clue? We're here to take part in the yearly Chunin exams that Konoha is hosting today, or have you not been paying attention? Chunin exams. Konohamaru quickly explained just what were the Chunin exams, and Naruto, along with Sasuke, were immediately interested in what they were told. Apparently the Chunin exams were used to find the best viable genin to become Chunin, and T was one way to become viable for Jonin rank and eventually Hokage. This got Naruto interest big time, and then he turned and spoke to the three genin from Suna. Hold on here, you haven't exactly said your names just yet. The blonde ninja turned and gave Naruto a curious but very sly look, making Naruto grin just a little bit, but enough for the blonde female ninja to grin right back. You mean me? If you don't mind, of course. After all, ladies first, right? The female ninja smiled and replied. You're a rather interesting guy, and for calling me a lady in a nice way too. My name is Tamari. Tamari. Nice name. So how long do you plan on being here in Konoha for the Chunin exams? There's some really good ramen and more here in Konoha. Tamari smirked at that and replied. Why? Asking me out on a date or something? Before Naruto could reply, Kankuro stepped forward and gave a glare at Naruto and spoke in a very serious tone. Hey, stay the hell away from my sister or I'm going to make sure you are dead meat. Tamari glared at her middle sibling and spoke seriously. Kankuro. Calm down. Naruto smiled and spoke seriously. That's all right. Maybe some other time, and I take it that the one with the sand gourd is your brother. Tamari and Kankuro turned and saw Gaara turn, and the youngest of the Sand siblings spoke to Naruto in an even voice, all the while observing the blonde ninja. He felt something was different about this one before him. He had been through many battles before and didn't face any serious enemies at the moment, but this one. He moved fast and was able to nearly break Kenkuro's arm. He's interesting. That's correct. My name is Gaara of the Desert Sand, and Kankuro and Tamari are my siblings. And who are you? Naruto Uzumaki of Konoha. The two stared at one another and there was some silence between the pair until Gaara smiled a bit. All forward to fighting you, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto grinned and replied. Likewise, Gaara. Likewise. As soon as the trio left the area, Sasuke and Sakura relaxed, and so did Naruto, and then they were told about the fact that the Chunin exams would be starting, and Sasuke amazingly agreed with Naruto on the fact that this was a great chance to improve their abilities and test themselves against the other village ninja teams who were no doubt going to be taking part in the Chunin exams. Sasuke believed this would be a great chance to test his Sharingan. Sakura was the only one who was rather hesitant about the whole thing, while the two males in her team were more than eager, making her think her stance on the matter. As Sasuke left to get some work done in his family home, Sakura turned and walked towards her own home, but Naruto stops her and tells her that he believes that she has much to give to the team. She should decide if she wants to be part of the Chunin exams with them, and he believes that while she was not gifted like Sasuke, she could really do much for the team. Naruto leaves and Konohamaru and his friends joined him, allowing Sakura to think on his words. Unaware that they were being watched by a trio of genin, one had a strange hunchback-like appearance and wore full-face bandages, the other wore a mask-style forehead protector and wore bracers as well, while the other member was a girl who wore a more formal forehead protector. What do you think, Dosu? Nothing, Zaku. Just weaklings, but that desert brat, the blonde, and that Uchiha kid, we have to wary of the three of them. Come on, we have to move on with what we need to do. The group left and kept out of sight, but the one who was the female of the band turned and she saw Naruto, who was chatting with Konohamaru and his friends, and she couldn't help but smile somewhat lustfully as she licked her lips at the sight of the blonde. Unknown to even the sound genin, there was another watcher, and it was none other than Kakashi himself. He had seen the whole brief battle between Naruto and the Sand siblings and he was not too happy with the results. He then thought about what was going to happen the next day. He would meet with his genin team. And he thought back on what happened. Flashback. Kakashi knew that his suggestion would not sit well with Iruka the day before, but he had to admit that the Chunin surprised him at how unhappy he was with the suggestion that Naruto and the others be part of the Chunin exams, along with several of the other students who had graduated from the academy. Not that Iruka resorted to anything embarrassing, but was shouting and very angry as well. Kakashi was aware of the fact that Iruka had risked his life to shield Naruto when Mizuki tried to kill the blonde ninja. And the fact that Naruto considered Iruka a father figure made Iruka more protective of him, but he was able to convince Iruka that both Sakura and Sasuke will be ready, and with the new discovery, Naruto would be more than a capable handful for the other participants, and it would be a good way to gauge just what sort of advantages the devices gave Naruto. Iruka was far from pleased at the idea of using Naruto as a test subject, but Kakashi also pointed out that Naruto desired challenges, and challenges that tested the ninja's skills and abilities truly was the measuring stick of how a ninja would know his or her abilities and limits and how to surpass said limits. Keeping Naruto safe would not allow him to grow. Pain, in controlled amounts, would push Naruto onward, and as much as Kakashi hated to admit it, placing Naruto in a certain amount of danger will allow him to grow as a ninja. Iruka was not happy but eventually conceded to Kakashi and also to the Hokage, as Sarutobi could understand Kakashi's reasoning, but warned Kakashi not to take it too far. Having reminded the Jonin the danger of the Kyuubi getting loose, it was only pure luck the Naruto had managed to suppress the Kyuubi's chakra when he discovered that the masked ninja youth who aided Zabuza was actually the same young man he befriended. But in a setting like the Chunin exams, there was the risk that Naruto would be pushed too hard and somehow the Kyuubi would come loose and Naruto would be a danger to everyone in the Chunin exams, including his teammates, since while it was only a small amount of the Kyuubi's chakra that was loosened in Wave Country, there was no telling what could happen if Naruto's emotions would help loosen the seal too much and the Kyuubi took over. And the presence of the devices in Naruto's body cells and what they had given Naruto, which was a near limitless reserve of normal chakra and enhanced abilities, it made the situation very delicate. End of flashback. Yes, this is risky, but I have no doubt they will do all right. Despite Sasuke and Naruto being very much antagonistic with one another, they were an excellent team when they fought Haku and Zabuza, with Sakura keeping them grounded and not at each other's throats. They will be fine. Kakashi sighed as the day continued on and he turned to that gates and knew that things were moving on to the stage play that he knew was the Chunin exams. Already there were dignitaries and guests coming in, along with other genin teams as well. The Jonin then sighed as he quickly made his way to the Hokage Tower, though he, Iruka, and Sarutobi already agreed to allow Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura into the Chunin exams. It had to be done officially, both to his team and that of the other Jonin. The next day, Naruto woke up feeling very energized and goes to his apartment's fridge and takes out an extra helping of instant ramen, dried fish and meat that were quick to eat, and milk to start the day. His place was pretty basic and simplistic to his tastes. He had money but not much to buy all the goods most people had, and he wished he had more money to keep his apartment nice, but at least now as a genin he had some money. But this Chunin exams was the key to his dreams of being Hokage and finally proving to everyone in the village that he was more than the Kyuubi container they thought him to be. No need to worry about all that for now, time for some food. The blonde quickly made short work of his break fast and was now fully dressed in his new clothes. He had reverently placed aside his old clothes, and while many though of his clothes to be ugly and so old-fashioned, he didn't. They were personal gifts handed to him by a kind old man of the village who died when he was younger. The LD man was among the very few who didn't abuse him or call him bad names, but considered him an annoying but kind-hearted scamp and gave him his clothes for free, even the ones he wore now. As soon as he was done, he headed off, unaware that in his body, the nanomachines were already hard at work breaking down the food and milk he had taken for breakfast and quickly processed them in his stomach and transported the nutrients effectively and quickly. Even the blonde's breathing had been perfected with the nanomachines, improving his lung capacity and improving the storage and use of oxygen in his body, making his body work 3 to 4 times its normal capacity, though the blonde was not yet fully aware of it. As soon as he got to the meeting place, he saw Sakura and Sasuke. The blonde greeted Sakura and she greeted him as well. Naruto then looked at Sasuke and replied as he noted that Sasuke seemed rather tired. Hey Sasuke, you look kind of tired. Did you do some late night training? Sasuke looked at Naruto and gave a casually relaxed and nonchalant look. What makes you say that, Dobi? Because you've got some faint eye bags underneath. You should consider cutting down on the late night stuff. No sense tiring yourself to exhaustion. And I think you need to seriously consider a wardrobe change. You smell of sweat and smoke. Have you been using smoke bombs again? Because I swear I can smell the powder residue on your clothes. Even the smell is on your hair, so you need to change the shampoo you're using. Because that one you've got isn't doing a good job at the moment of hiding the smoke smell. Your hair smells like sandalwood and gunpowder. Not very flattering, you know. Sasuke gave Naruto a very confused and slightly shocked look, because Naruto was right. He had been training in the late night and used some smoke bombs, but he had taken a bath and used the sandalwood-scented shampoo which he used a lot as a kid growing up. But how did Naruto know all that just by smell? Are you pulling my leg, Dobi? Hey, I smell what I smell. Don't blame me if you smell of sweat, smoke, and sandalwood. Sakura was surprised as she heard all this, as she had no idea that Sasuke used sandalwood-scented shampoo. Unknown to the two ninja and to Naruto himself at the moment, the nanomachines had upgraded most of Naruto's senses, including his sense of smell, allowing him the ability to outpace even a dog's sense of smell and sense of hearing as well. His eyesight had also undergone some modifications to suit with the passive scanning abilities given by the biocomputer, thus the increase in his eye color. Well now, that was rather informative. The trio turned and there was Kakashi, who was walking in their direction with his book usually in his hands, and he greeted them in his usual smile and stopped there and placed the book aside and spoke. I have some good news for you three. Now normally there would be a need for you three to take in more missions to gain the needed experience and skills to be candidates, but I have decided to allow you three to take applications into the Chunin exams. Naruto was smiling greatly while Sasuke grinned along with Naruto. The rather embarrassing episode between the two forgotten at the information that they were going to get their chance to take part in the Chunin exams, while Sakura gave only a brief thoughtful look and then smiled as she spoke. So when do we take the exams? Eager to take part in the exams to Sakura. All right then. Here are the forms for taking the Chunin exams. It will start in a few days from now. at the end of the week so you have time to think about your decisions in the Chunin exams. Here is some information that is important. The Chunin exams are held twice a year, so if you do not feel ready for this current Chunin exams, then you can decide to take the next Chunin exams, though you will have to train even harder to prove that you all have what it takes to retake the Chunin exams. Once you've decided on your courses of action, then you will all assemble at the academy for the Chunin exams. It will start in room 301, so be there early. Kakashi then handed the application forms for the genin of his team to sign. He had no doubts about Naruto and Sasuke signing up for this very much important chance to prove their abilities to others and to each other, but Sakura, despite her brave front at the moment, was a concern. But the Jonin knew that her desire to be with the group would help, and her perfect chakra control, intelligence, analytical skills, and knowledge would prove helpful to both Naruto and Sasuke. All right then, I'll be there in the academy waiting for you, and don't be late. Naruto grinned and replied. Don't worry, Kakashi-sensei, we'll be there. For once I agree with the loud mouth. I won't miss this chance for the world. Better that we face the competition in one place instead of looking for them. Kakashi sighed a bit and bid his team farewell. He now had to see if they were going to make it. No doubts on the two boys, but Sakura, well, he would have to wait and see. A few days later, Naruto smiled a bit as he waited for the arrival of this team. He preferred to be there early and ready for anything at this point and time. And sure enough, Sasuke arrived, and Naruto decided not to start the day arguing with Sasuke about his bathing habits, as he smelled nothing out of the ordinary on his teammate, but he was rather curious on where Sakura was. He had half expected Sakura to be around. Hey Sasuke, where's Sakura-chan? I have no idea. I thought she was already here. The two then turned, and there was Sakura herself, and she seemed to be in a rather quick hurry. The pink-haired Kunoichi sighed and relaxed a bit as she spoke. She made the decision to be with her team and take the Chunin exams, no matter the results. Sorry about the delay. Ran into some important chores for my folks. I see. You ready to move on? Naruto nodded, and so did Sasuke at the question, and then the trio made their way into the academy, and they could see that a large number of genin were there to get ready for the Chunin exams. But when they made their way to the second floor, they spotted a pair of genin pushing away several other genin, and this was rather odd. They then heard that these two were trying to force the others to rethink and leave the Chunin exams. Naruto was unaware of it yet, but the biocomputer began to scan the two genin and quickly determined that they were using an illusion, and Naruto saw through it thanks to the enhanced eyesight given to him by the nanomachines, and he quickly was surprised to see that the room number was wrong and that inside of youngsters like them, those two were adults and dressed in uniforms and wearing forehead protectors as they managed to knock down. Guys, those characters aren't genin. That's the wrong room number, and we're on the wrong floor. Sasuke and Sakura were surprised until Sakura decided to examine their surroundings and quickly realized that Naruto was right. Naruto's right. This is the wrong floor, and I get the feeling that this must a genjutsu. Pretty strong one too. I'd say that those two might be Chunin exam proctors, either Chunin themselves or low Jonin level. Nicely done, guys. I guess that Black Gunk's given you the ability to screen out genjutsu illusions, Dobi. Naruto didn't get angry and decided to reply with a smirk. Why, Sasuke? Are you jealous of my anti-genjutsu vision? Sasuke glared a little and had to admit that he was a bit jealous, as he had not noted the genjutsu for a second until Naruto blew it open and Sakura made it clearer, but he then grinned a bit more and replied. HMPH. Not at the moment. Let's go see just how things will play out. Things turned out rather interestingly as the disguised Chunin launched an attack at Sasuke, but then the supposedly injured genin that was knocked down earlier moved at high speed and intercepted both Sasuke and the disguised Chunin, surprising the others, including Naruto. The biocomputer quickly scanned the genin and then the genin's apparent companions, who appeared and were not very happy with his actions. Apparently they were trying to keep a fairly low profile, no doubt top scout the competition. The scans were complete, and it was then that introductions were made. The genin with the green jumpsuit was named Rock Lee, the one with the long hair, bandages, coat and shorts was Neji Hyuga, and the female was Tenten. Naruto kept out of the sidelines for the time being as the biocomputer quickly assessed all three subjects. Subject: Rock Lee, scan and assessment complete. Highly skilled fighter in hand-to-hand combat, CQC rank of 3rd degree junior master. High levels of dexterity and agility. Strength is considerable. Scans indicate weights on legs that lower full speed and power. Possible training tools. Possible threat level to host. Considerable. Possible need for activation of armor in high threat level. Activation of level 2 weapons systems and level 2 defensive systems optional. // Low level S of bioenergy but high genetic enhancement potential. Subject. Neji Hyuga. Scan and assessment complete. High skill in hand-to-hand combat. CQC rank of first degree master. Fighting style appears similar to pressure point assassin style attacks. Possess unknown genetic traits. Good agility and speed. Possible threat level to host. Considerable. Same pattern as before. Subject. Tenten. Scan and assessment complete. Exceptional in eye coordination and extreme accuracy with throwing weapons. Possible elite marksman rank skill level. Considerable skills with close combat weapon systems. Poor hand-to-hand combat skills when deprived of weapons, reliant on weapon arsenals. Possible threat to host. Near considerable. Activation of armor system is authorized. Level 2 defensive systems will be default defensive system settings. As Naruto and his group left, Neji looked at them as they moved on to locate the real room where they were really going to take the exams. That one with the attitude is no doubt the last of the Uchiha clan and no doubt will be a great challenge. The female companion seems to be of average abilities, and not too much of a threat. However, the other one is different, he's hiding something. Tenten had to admit that he found that Sasuke was nice to the eyes, but then she looked at Naruto and was very shocked and surprised to see the tall blonde ninja. Like Neji, she felt that there was something odd about the young ninja, but she was not sure just yet on what was different about the blonde. Have to admit though, he's very attractive. It was then that Lee decided to leave for a moment and told his team to go ahead and he'll catch up later on with them. Neji knew that Lee would keep his word and moved on with Tenten, wondering just what was it that Lee wanted to prove. In the hallway, Naruto sighed and shrugged his shoulders as Lee got ready. He didn't know why he knew it that Sasuke was out of his league, but he did. There was something different about Lee than first glance. The blonde ninja could tell that this guy was no ordinary looking ninja, especially when he saw the way the guy moved when he lashed out with both hands to stop Sasuke and one of those disguised Chunin. The genin had followed them, and when they were about to leave and look for the right room, Lee leapt down and called Sasuke out and challenged him to a fight. While making the moves on Sakura, and Naruto felt some surprise. He was angry that he wasn't going to fight the genin, but he decided to look on as Sasuke got ready to fight him. However, he decided to remind them of something. I hate to break up this whole thing, but you two do realize that if we don't hurry up and find room 301, we could very well be barred from taking the Chunin exams. Sakura, who had recovered from Lee's antics and said her piece, knew that Naruto had a point. The more time they spent here, the higher the chance was that they would be barred from the Chunin exams. Naruto is right, Sasuke-kun. We don't have time for this. If we don't make it soon, we'll be disqualified. Don't worry, this will be over quickly. Naruto, however, didn't buy that. Sasuke, we don't have time for this. Besides, Lee is no ordinary fighter despite the looks. Naruto, butt out. I was challenged by this guy and I am going to prove to him that the Uchiha are not the kind you challenge for the sake of it. Naruto shook his head and sighed. He didn't know why, but he knew this was not going to end well. All right, Sasuke. Suit yourself, but don't blame me if bushy brows beats the tar out of you. I might not know why, but I've got a good feeling he's more deadly than he looks. You should consider his words, Sasuke-kun. I might not show it, but I am one of the top genin graduates a year before you, so do not take me lightly. I see. Well, prove it to me. Very well then. Defend yourself, Sasuke Uchiha. As Sasuke and Lee faced off, Sakura thought about what she had seen previously on how Lee caught Sasuke's attack and the disguised Chunin, and she began to suspect that maybe Naruto is right about Lee. She then turned to Naruto and spoke. Are you sure that Lee is a lot more powerful than he looks, Naruto? Naruto nodded and replied. I'm not sure myself, since this Lee was able to fool even me at first, but I can be sure that this time he's being serious. I got a feeling that this is going to be one serious fight for Sasuke. And sure enough, Naruto was proven right, as Sasuke's attempts to attack and defend himself from Rock Lee proved to be futile, as the green jumpsuit wearing genin was proving to be quite the fighter and the two were throwing everything they had on one another, but Lee was winning. And when there was a break in the fight, the genin replied that he knew about the Sharingan and its abilities, but he knew that it was able to understand jutsus like ninjutsu and genjutsu along with reading an opponent's moves, but he pointed that he was not a user of either, and relied solely on taijutsu, and since his choice of combat hid nothing, he had little to fear from the Sharingan, as despite Sasuke being able to predict his moves, Sasuke was too slow to match him physically, saying with truth that Sasuke's Sharingan was worthless against his extreme taijutsu. Naruto could see that his assessment and feeling that Lee was no fool was right on the money, and the same could be said for Sakura as she saw Lee manhandle Sasuke. Naruto was right, this Lee is more than he looks. Naruto realized that Lee was about to unleash a powerful attack as soon as he was able to get Sasuke airborne and was about to step in, but then to his surprise, out came a turtle that could talk. The turtle called Lee's attention and Lee called off the attack and was now before the turtle, who began to berate Lee like a teacher or sensei. Whoa, this is new. Sasuke was livid with rage at how easily he had been bested by Lee, as Sakura tried to check his condition after she caught him from hitting the ground and getting further injury. He glared at Lee and couldn't help but feel even more humiliated by what had happened. How could I have lost that freak? It was then that they met another Jonin named Guy, who apparently was Lee's idol and Team Jonin Sensei. After watching a rather interesting display of oddness from the two and hearing that Guy and Kakashi were rivals, Guy bid farewell to them and noted Naruto and Sasuke as he saw greatness in them both. The Jonin Sensei of Neji, Tenten, and Lee recalled Kakashi words that his team was the best he had seen and more than ready for the exams, and now he was starting to agree with his rival's assessment. Let us see if Kakashi is right about them. Rock Lee then spoke to Sasuke. Hey Sasuke, I have to confess that I was not totally honest with you. There is truth to what I had said before, that I wanted to test my skills, but you are not the one I truly wanted to test my skills against. I lied to you in the fight as well. I said before that I am one of the top genin in Konoha, but there is in truth another, and he is on my team. Naruto, however, already had a good idea on just who Lee was referring to, since he knew of only one guy on Lee's team. He must be referring to that guy who's a Hyuga then. I came here to finally defeat him. You were merely practice, but now you are a target. The next time you and I meet, it will be in a fight to the finish and I will crush you. You have been warned. With that, Lee leapt up and flipped to the balcony while Sasuke fumed at his loss at the hands of Rock Lee, while Sakura and Naruto looked on. Sasuke faced away and tightened his grip and his teeth at the memory and what Lee had told him. Sakura turned and was very worried about Sasuke. Sasuke-kun. Naruto then looked at this teammate and replied. I told you not to take him lightly, now look what happened. Naruto. Now isn't the time for this. Sasuke looked at Naruto and glared. You shut up, Naruto. The next time I see that green jumpsuit wearing nut, I'll beat him to the ground. Naruto was not convinced and replied. Humph, look who's talking. The way you fought Lee wasn't the most graceful I've seen you. If you do meet him again, you'd probably get your butt kicked again. Why you? Stop it, you too. Naruto looked at Sasuke with his arms crossed on his chest while Sasuke glared and was ready for a fight, while Sakura tried to maintain the peace and did so by stepping between the two, and she spoke. We're on the same team here. Stop this right now. Naruto then replied. You didn't see the bruises on Lee's hands under those bandages, did you? Sasuke then recalled the sight of Lee re-wrapping his bandages and he saw the bruises and injuries on the genin's hands, and Naruto knew that Sasuke saw them and replied. I can bet Lee's been training until he drops in exhaustion and gets right back up to do it all over again. He trains much harder than you. Plus he knows that the Sharingan isn't perfect. Trust me Sasuke, Lee was taking it easy on you when you fought. Had he been serious, you've got far worse than when that turtle stopped him. Sasuke then looked to the ground and realized that Naruto was right about Lee, and then Naruto replied. We're not dealing with lower level genin here, Sasuke. We're dealing with the best every hidden village has to offer, including our own here, and Lee's just one of the reasons this Chunin exams is worth it. Think about that. It won't be a real test if we fought weak guys and ladies all the way to the end of the Chunin exams, right? Sasuke thought about that and then realized the truth there in Naruto's words and smiled, easing the tension in the room between them. I hate to say it, Dobi, but you're right. This won't be a real challenge if we fought weak people all the way to the end. This Chunin exams is going to be a real test. The three then made their way to reach the floor where the Chunin exams were being held. In the real third floor, Naruto, Sakura, and Sasuke arrived on the real third floor and were already on their way to the main room when they spotted their Jonin sensei before them, leaning on the door. Kakashi smiled a bit to himself as he spotted his genin team and looked them over, Not to mention he approved of Naruto's new look and also the presence of Sakura herself. He knew that things hinged on all of them to be as a team. Well, I'm happy that all three of you are here, namely you most of all Sakura, for your sake and that of both Naruto and Sasuke. Huh, what do you mean by that, Kakashi-sensei? Sakura asked as she was very much confused by what Kakashi had said to her just now. She had made this decision to stand by her teammates on her own. That also got the attention of both Sasuke and Naruto as they also wondered just what was going on here. Now you three can formally be allowed to participate in the Chunin exams. Why do you say that, Kakashi-sensei? Because in truth, Sakura, only Genin teams of 3 can apply to take the Chunin exams can be allowed to participate in the Chunin exams. That's a formal rule that is very much enforced and no one Genin is allowed to take the Chunin exams without a team with them. But sensei, you said that joining the Chunin exams was a personal, individual decision. That is correct, I did say that. Then was what you said was a lie, Kakashi-sensei? Not entirely, Sakura, more like a test. You see, it is a personal decision to take the Chunin exams, but that decision can affect the lives of your teammates, in the same fashion as one decision can determine the outcome of a mission and the lives of your teammates. I didn't tell you that, or Sasuke, or Naruto, because I didn't want them to pressure you into joining them. And at the very same time, I didn't want you to feel obligated to join because of whatever feelings you might have concerning either Sasuke or Naruto. I wanted you to decide for yourself if you wanted to take the Chunin exams of your own free will. I see, so you mean that if Sasuke-kun and Naruto-kun came but I didn't join them, then they would. I would not have allowed them to enter this room and take the Chunin exams. If you had not arrived with them of your free will, then it would have been the end of the road for all three of you, but that is now a moot point. Kakashi then spoke with a proud voice and his Genin team could sense that and they were also in high spirits. You're all here for the right reasons. Sakura. Sakura blushed a bit and smiled at the pride and respect being given to her by their Jonin mentor. Naruto. Naruto grinned widely in anticipation. And Sasuke. Sasuke smiled as well, ready to test himself in the fights to come. Kakashi then smiled at all three of them and made his pride known to them. I'm very proud of you all. I couldn't have asked for a better team under my command. Good luck and do well. With that, Kakashi stepped aside as Sasuke and Sakura were the first to reach for the doors and open them, while Naruto replied with a smile to his Jonin sensei. We won't disappoint you, sensei, believe it. As soon as the three of them opened the doors and went inside, Kakashi sighed and looked outside to the windows to view all of Konoha. I have a feeling that things are about to get real hairy soon, and I am rather curious how Naruto's classmates are going to react to the changes he's undergone. This will be a very interesting Chunin exams this year, that I am absolutely sure of. As soon as they entered the room, Sakura couldn't help but feel rather worried about the number of people that were in the room and the glares they were getting. Sasuke looked back and gave a defiant look at one after the other, while Naruto looked on unafraid as he was becoming more annoyed by the looks. It was then that they spotted several more arrivals heading towards them. Naruto smiled a bit as he recognized them right off the bat. The long-haired blonde female was none other than Ino Yamanaka, a kunoichi from the Yamanaka clan who apparently had the ability to switch her mind with her foe, allowing her to control the foe for a short period of time. Despite being loud and somewhat annoying, he admitted that Ino certainly took good care of herself and was best friends with her two companions, not to mention she was easy on the eyes. One such companion was Shikamaru Nara, one of the laziest guys in the academy and amazingly able to graduate with some great marks despite being very lazy. Naruto knew about Shikamaru being a lot more than he looked, but still he liked to goad the lazy guy once in a while and had to admit that despite his lazy attitude, Shikamaru had guts. Choji was there as well, stuffing his mouth full of chips as usual. The large genin was easily recognized not just because of his bulk, but because he was always eating. Naruto never knew a time when he had seen Choji not eating at the moment. The one thing Choji took to offense was when people called him fat. The very second he heard that, the normally mellow and somewhat dense Choji became a powerhouse of destruction, and even he would never call Choji fat. The other trio heading towards them he recognized quite easily. The first was none other than Kiba Inuzuka and his pet Akamaru. The duo were always together and it was understandable as Kiba and Akamaru were close, and Kiba being an Inuzuka. He didn't quite like Kiba as he was too much of a loud mouth, even more than him in some respects, but that was not really an issue at the moment. The other boy was Shino Aburame. He knew little about Shino and his clan. He was a mystery at the moment to be blonde ninja. But he was not too much of annoyance as he was always the silent and somewhat creepy type. Even in the days in the academy, Naruto had little to no idea just what sort of person Shino was at the moment. The other one, however, was none other than Hyuga Hinata, a shy and timid wallflower of a girl that he knew of back in the academy. She was always shy and seemed to blush and look away whenever he would look at her direction. It wasn't as creepy as when he looked at Shino, but it was rather weird in a way. Not that Hinata was bad looking, she was rather nice to the eyes, though the silver irises were a bit off. Then again, being a Hyuga meant that her eyes were normal and she could see him just fine. The one thing that made Naruto curious was she was the only girl he knew that had no interest in Sasuke, and despite himself he wondered just who Hinata had her eyes on if not his teammate. Ino was the first to speak. Hey Sasuke-kun, you made it. I was beginning to wonder just when you were going to show, and whoa, who's the guy with you? Hiba looked at Naruto and wondered about that as well. Who's this dude? I certainly don't recall meeting him at graduation. Hey, isn't your other teammate supposed to be Naruto or something? Did he get replaced? Shikamaru asked as he was vaguely curious on where the loud-mouthed blonde had gone. Ino had to admit that the tall blonde before her was certainly good-looking, even better in some respects to Sasuke, though she would not say it out loud at the moment, but there was something oddly familiar with this hunk, though she had no idea what that might be. She had never met him before, though the marks on his face were oddly familiar. Hinata noted that as well, as she couldn't help but find the tall teen before her very handsome, but she cared only for Naruto and preferred to see her crush. The Hyuga heiress had a long-time affection for the blonde ever since she met him, and she wished to someday tell him of her feelings. Naruto laughed a bit and then replied to the question. I'm still here, Shikamaru, or have you forgotten? The others looked at Naruto and were still not convinced, and Naruto decided to remind them. Come on, you guys. Who do you think wears orange, loves ramen, makes fun of Iruka-sensei, always late in classes, and usually pulls pranks in school? They other genin then looked at Naruto more closely and then they recognized him, but with some surprise. Choji was midway to eating another chip when he realized that the person was actually Naruto in full growth. Kiba was looking at Naruto in disbelief, Shikamaru looked on in surprise, and Sino just stared. Ino and Hinata were the most affected as they had no idea that the blonde hunk before them was indeed Naruto. Ino then walked over to Naruto and used the same release jutsu as Sakura had done, in the thought that it was Henge, and to the shock of them all, instead of revealing the short blonde genin, the tall blonde was still there, telling them there and now that this was no Henge. He couldn't help but stare at Naruto with even greater scrutiny, and she began to have rather indecent thoughts, and for good reason at the moment. Hinata was going to faint as she realized that the handsome young man before her was her crush Naruto. She had thought him to be nice on the eyes, but now seeing him in this form was enough to make her feel even more heated as she found herself staring at the utterly well-built frame of her crush. She had no idea on how he had become this way, but she was not going to complain as her imagination began to get indecent thoughts that clashed with her normally timid and shy persona. Akamaru then sniffed the air around Naruto and gave a slight yelp as the puppy could smell something odd in the air around Naruto, nothing threatening, but seemingly off in some way. It was then that another person came on the scene and called them out. He wore purple and white and had glasses on him as well. Hey you guys, I suggest you keep it down while you're here. You must be the 9 rookies I heard about recently, all fresh and eager from the academy. Let me hand you some simple but very helpful advice. Don't make too much of a racket or you'll be rubbing people the wrong way and hear that a big mistake. And who are you? Ino asked, not very happy to be distracted from looking at Naruto and Sasuke. The name's Kabuto Yakushi. The group then discussed what Kabuto knew of the Chunin exams and the history and reasons behind the creation of the Chunin exams and who were the participants and the number of countries who were taking part of the Chunin exams, along with the villages as well. Shikamaru groaned as Kabuto explained the exams and how he had failed 6 times and this was his 7th try at the moment, along with the real reason for the exams in maintaining balance in the number of ninja in the countries taking part in the Chunin exams. Kabuto then revealed his information cards and that was where Sasuke got to see the statistics on Rock Lee and Gaara. The other genin were shocked to hear the Gaara had been in a B-ranked mission as a genin and came back alive and 0 injuries, while his foes were all dead. This made others worry, namely Shikamaru. It was then that Sakura noted a new village with the symbol of a musical note and she read the name. Hidden Sound. I've never heard of them before. Have you heard of them, Kabuto-san? I have. They're a recent ninja village located somewhere in Rice Country. No one knows anything about them or who their village head is. As far as I have figured, they only sent one genin team. One genin? That's kind of odd, isn't it? Kabuto nodded at Naruto's question. Yes, but for only one team to be sent, that means that the group must be very skilled to be the only team they have sent, or it could be because they have limited genin, who knows? Like I said, they are a mystery group so no one knows much about them at the moment. Sakura then saw the faces of all the genin teams there and asked Kabuto a question. Do you think it's really going to be tough this time around? Oh yes, in my 4 years being here in the Chunin exams, I can tell you honestly that I've never seen a batch with this much potential in years. Kabuto then spoke solemnly. You guys will need to keep a very low profile since if you try something, they will all certainly be very angry to say the least. They all are strong foes, so saying something to piss them off is not advisable. Naruto thought about it and Sasuke and Sakura wondered if Naruto's silence meant that he was getting frightened by all that he had been told by Kabuto. Kabuto himself noted that and wondered if the blonde Konoha genin with the sword on his back would be frightened by the information he had been handing him and his classmates. Naruto-kun. Is he getting scared by all this? Maybe I should talk to him. I mean, it's okay to be scared and all. Those guys are older and more experienced than us since we're rookies. Don't tell me the Dobie's going to choke on this. Please tell me he isn't going to quit here and now, after all we had to deal with to get here. Neither of them had to worry as Naruto laughed out loud and then looked right at all of the other teams and pointed right at all of them with a challenging glare. All right, you guys. Listen up. I am Naruto Uzumaki and I am going to beat the tar out of every last one of you, so bring it on and show me just how tough you all really are. Believe it. On the other side of the door, Kakashi couldn't help but laugh at the declaration that Naruto spouted out at all the ninja in the room. That was Naruto all right. No matter what the odds were and who the blonde was facing or how many, he was more than willing to fight them. The Jonin thought back at the time when he, Asuma, and Kurenai had recommended their students and he knew that things were going to get interesting as soon as his fellow Jonin got to see his team in action, but he had a fairly accurate idea that there would be those who were going to take offense to Naruto's words. Sasuke and Kabuto grinned at the announcement while the other Konoha rookie 9 genin, with the exception of Hinata who smiled warmly, groaned. Sakura was about to clonk her partner on the head but decided against it for 2 reasons. The first was with his newfound chakra reserves and abilities, Naruto had every reason to be utterly confident, and the second was that he was too tall for her to reach. The rest of the genin, true to Kakashi's predictions, were not happy and quite a number of them itching for a chance to give Naruto a serious lesson to keep his trap shut. In one of the groups were the Sand siblings. Gaara watched with a slight smirk, while Kankuro growled a bit. That's the same guy as before who nearly crushed my arm. Temari nodded as she looked at Naruto with a smile and slight blush. He's really got guts to be saying that, I like that. In another side of the whole room was Konoha Genin Team 10, Tenten, Lee, and Neji were looking on as the atmosphere in the room became darker after Naruto spoke. Tenten sighed a bit and smirked a little as she recalled just what Naruto said. That guy's something else all right. He's certainly got spirit. Neji replied as he studied Naruto. Lee interjected as well. He's got fire and passion. I guess he's going to be quite the handful, isn't he? One group of genin however had other ideas. Did you hear what that one said about our village of the hidden sound? He called us little, a mystery. Zaku said with a glare at Kabuto. I heard. Dosu replied as the only female in their group. The one named Kin spoke as well. I think we need to teach this guy a lesson. I think so as well. Remove some of the mystery about sound, help up his information for him and let him know that if he insults the sound shinobi, he's going to have to be ready for the consequences. The genin quickly made their way to Kabuto, who sensed their coming. However, that was when Naruto's biocomputer sent a warning signal to Naruto and he quickly spotted them as well. He had no idea what was going on with the sound genin but he was not going to remain idle for long. The very second Naruto moved in front of Kabuto to shield him from attack, the biocomputer in Naruto's body quickly began to scan the approaching sound genin and identified them as threats to its master and since there were 2 of them, it split its scanning to both Dosu and Zaku. Threats identified. Scanning. Threat level of Subject 1 determined, mid-class. Threat level of Subject 2 determined, mid-class. Combined threat levels determined, near considerable, activating level 2 weapon payload, optional lethal payload selected, activating level 1 defensive measures, activating partial bio-armor defenses. Naruto was before Kabuto as Dosu and Zaku came in and the one with the wild hair fired several kunai while taunting Naruto, who placed his arms forward. Sorry pretty boy, you're gone, Naruto. Then, there was a flash of light on Naruto's arms and the light faded as black liquid suddenly burst forth from his arms and then began to form about his arms and then the liquid solidified and there was now armor on Naruto's arms up to the elbow. The armor was futuristic in design, the inner parts were all black and Naruto's hand was in some form of full metal glove with finger guards that gave his hands a black claw-like appearance. The armor was black with white and red markings as well. The ninja in the room were surprised as they had no idea what that was as Naruto then raised his left arm. Activate kinetic energy barrier at level 1 power level. The other ninja watched as the left gauntlet somehow opened a section it itself and then a glowing sphere of energy suddenly appeared and surrounded Naruto and Kabuto, and the kunai that Zaku threw bounced off the shield without nicking it in the least. It was then that Naruto then decided that it was payback time. Dosu tried to use his secret weapons but to his surprise, the second his arm hit the barrier, it violently tossed him back a few feet with a crackle as Naruto looked at the gauntlets on his arm with some surprise, but that faded as he grinned. Oh yeah, it's show time. Damn you. Take this. Zaku shouted as he fired another barrage of kunai and Kin fired some Senbon as well. Naruto then decided to see what else could happen. The biocomputer then scanned the weapons and decided to deal with them quickly. Activating nano filament wires. Naruto lashed out with his right gauntlet and got the results he wanted in a unique way as the handguard launched small objects that quickly revealed lines of some sort of metal. The objects moved quickly and merely hit the kunai and Senbon. Slish. Zaku and Dosu moved back with shock and so did Kin as they were barely able to avoid the glowing strings that appeared out of Naruto's bio-armor as it had easily sliced through the kunai and Senbon that they had thrown. The sliced weapons fell down and Naruto smiled as he was starting to get used to the weapons this black gunk was giving him, he liked it a lot. The other ninja in the room, including the rookie 9, were stunned visibly when they saw Naruto's arms being covered by what appeared to be armored gauntlets. The nano-filament wires were immediately reeled back into Naruto's right gauntlet and as he then aimed his right hand at them into the eyes of the others, and even to Naruto who had no idea what the nano-filament wires were, a strange device came out from the armor as the metal came alive and there was some sort of launcher aimed right at the two genin from sound. Dosu then spoke to Naruto. This has nothing to do with you. Get out of our way. Naruto snorted and then to the people's surprise, the left gauntlet seemed to have a section morph and out came a trio of claws from the handguard section and these claws then were covered in bright light and the blonde replied as he got into an attack position. And then he decided to summon his chakra, unaware that the massive amounts of chakra he had in him due to the nanomachines was so intense that even releasing a minute amount was going to be spectacular. The ninja in the room looked at Naruto as he began to glow in an intense blue of chakra, and then the wave of the release created a gust of wind in the room and forced some of the ninja back at the intensity of the chakra Naruto was radiating. A glowing aura of pure concentrated chakra covered Naruto as his eyes glowed with deep blue chakra as he spoke seriously to the stunned sound genin. Make me. Gaara and his siblings watched in fascination at the sight as Naruto was ready to fight and their eyes were directed at the gauntlets that had appeared on the blonde's arms. There is a brief flash of light and the sounds of rushing liquid as the arms of the blonde ninja glowed and then there was the armor before them and now here he was literally glowing with chakra. Gaara was impressed. He had never felt that level of power before. It was like the same level of chakra he had with his demon but even more powerful. He was enjoying this immensely, and was eager to fight Naruto. Someone with that much power. I want to kill him. Temari was in awe and couldn't help but stare at Naruto. Wow. That much chakra in one guy. Kankuro was shaking his head and he looked at Naruto. Damn. And I thought that blonde brat was all hot air. Lee whistled at the sight before him. He had a feeling that the blonde ninja who was on Sasuke's team hidden his true powers when he had fought Sasuke previously and that made the genin wonder how things would have turned out had he fought Naruto instead of Sasuke. That is impressive Naruto-san, you make even Sasuke-san look tame. I wonder how things would have turned out if we fought. Neji didn't dare use the Byakugan as he thought that doing so would seriously blind him, so much chakra in one person was impossible. The human body could only produce a certain level of chakra, but this blonde genin before him had enough chakra to make him either a Jonin or an Anbu, or even more than that. This one is interesting. How he managed to contain that much chakra without anyone noticing is impressive. Tenten was speechless, but she was also heavily impressed. She had never seen any weapons like them before, and she prided herself as the finest weapons expert in the village. Wow, what has Naruto been eating all this time? Choji was stunned to the point that he stopped in mid-bite of the chips in his hands. Shikamaru couldn't help but gape at the sight of that much chakra coming from Naruto, and he had a feeling that it was just the icing on the cake at the moment. Ino was also stunned, but seeing Naruto this buffed up and handsome looking made her very bothered. Hinata was in awe of her handsome crush as he moved and fought in a way that was entrancing to her, and she was amazed at how powerful he was at the moment. The others watched as things got intense, but before things could get really interesting, there were some new arrivals, followed a booming voice. All right, you bunch of baby-faced degenerates. The fun and games are over, so get to your seats and stay there before I personally staple your butts on them. The smoke cleared, and out of the smoke were a large bunch of Chunin, and in the middle was a really tall and muscular man. The guy was dressed in a black trench coat along with the usual uniform of a Chunin proctor, with heavy gloves with metal plates on them, and he wore a forehead protector with the leaf symbol on it in the form of a bandana. He had several scars on his face that really made him look scary, namely the one that ran from his left cheek to his lip, and his voice certainly didn't help matters as he spoke once more. It's time to begin the Chunin exams. I am Ibiki Morino, your proctor for today, and also your worst nightmare and enemy come to life. Naruto said with pride as he walked alongside Sakura and Sasuke. The three had managed to pass the first half of the Chunin exams, which was a written test. The fact that it was a written test had broken Naruto's confidence at first, but somehow he was able to make it through the test with good or even better results. The situation played out when the genin had been forced to relax, and he was as well as he relaxed, and the armor on his hands and forearms returned to being liquid and faded away. Ever since that incident, everyone in the Chunin exams, with the exception of the Chunin proctors as they were not in the room at the time, had been keeping their eyes on him. Naruto didn't mind in the least as he sat down and got ready for the exams, though when he was told of the rules of the exams, he felt like he was about to be hanged. As soon as Ibiki was finished with the rules and the exams started, the ninja in the room were really feeling the pressure, and as time passed, several of the ninja were slowly but surely weeded out by the Chunin proctors and by Ibiki himself as they were slowly thinning the number of the genin taking the Chunin exams. It was then that Sakura and Sasuke figured out the real reason why the rules were so strict and the questions were so hard. The only way they could be able to pass the papers was to cheat and get the answers without being caught or make a blatant attempt at getting the answers from the other ninja. Sakura was the smart one in the group and was able to answer many of the questions, while Sasuke used his Sharingan to copy the answers from those he was able to see from the various genin who were still busy in the exams. The other genin quickly figured that out. Kiba and Akamaru were already getting into the act, with Akamaru acting as spotter, and since Kiba was the only one who could understand the barks Akamaru would make, they were in the clear. For all anyone knew, the dog was making noise only, but in reality the dog's increased senses as a canine gave the creature an edge to help his master. Shino likewise deployed his bugs to spy on the other students to find the ones who had the answers to the questions and the right answers at that. And it was easy as the insects he used were flies, and with their unique modes of vision allowed him to see the answers well. Hinata and her cousin Neji were able to answer most of the questions as they had studied well, while Neji's teammates, Rock Lee and Tenten, were working side by side, with Tenten manipulating a set of hidden mirrors and with near-invisible wire. Choji was able to get the answer, and Ino was, as well as the blonde ninja, had targeted Sakura with her family's most recognized jutsu, and the same could be said for Shikamaru. Tamari would rely on Kenkuro's use of his own puppet, while Gaara in turn used his chakra and sand to make an eye that copied the answers from the genin. Dosu and his fellow sound nin, recovering from the shock of Naruto's actions, used their training with sounds to find the right people to copy their answers by using the sounds made by their pencils and hands. All in all, the ninjas were proving themselves to be good in getting data, compared to the other ninja at the moment, however. Naruto didn't need to cheat at all. The biocomputer in his body had already studied the problems written in the papers, and its highly advanced data drives, processors, and core systems were able to easily break down and answer the questions in record time. The biocomputer then provided Naruto with the answers, and the blonde, still unaware of the passive system in his body, was surprised why he was able to answer the questions and do well. Hinata had tried to help him covertly, but he told her not to, as he didn't want her to get disqualified from the Chunin exams. After taking the 10th question his usual fashion, Ibiki was impressed by him and allowed them to pass the first stage of the Chunin exams with flying colors. Just as Anko made her appearance in a very interesting fashion and told them that she would be handling the second phase of the training. Naruto was eager for this next trial and turned to Sakura. "Hey Sakura-chan, you have any idea what the second test is?" Sakura thought about that and shook her head at that. "I'm sorry, but I have no clue at the moment about that, though I think that if the tests we took at the academy were any indication, the next test will test out our physical abilities and survival training." That's going to be harsh. The location for the second test must be one heck of a place. Sasuke was still silent but gave a glance towards Naruto. He had not forgotten how Naruto had been able to easily defeat the 3 sound genin with little to no difficulty, and wondered what else that Black Gunk had done to Naruto to have given him such power. He didn't want to show it, but he was starting to feel jealous of the blonde's newfound abilities and wondered just what else did the Black Gunk do to Naruto. He placed that out of his mind for the moment and bid his group farewell in his usual fashion. "We already know just where we're going to meet, so no sense being out for any more amount of time." As Sasuke turned, Naruto then had an idea. "Hey, why don't we at least have dinner together for once? We're a team, right, and we all made it through the first part of the Chunin exams. We should celebrate for once. Besides, seeing so many genin booted out during the whole time, we should be happy we made it this far, right?" Sakura had to admit the logic there in Naruto's argument. After being subjected to the rules and the pressure of the test, she was ever eager to relax and have fun, but she had to admit that she was rather short on funds for the time being and couldn't afford to pay for a large meal fit for a break celebration at the moment. And she was not happy with that, and she made her situation clear to Naruto and Sasuke. "I wish I could join you guys, but I don't have that much money on me at the moment for a long celebration." Naruto, however, grinned and replied, "No worries, Sakura-chan. I've managed to save all the money we've gotten on the missions we've had before the Chunin exams. It's not too big, so I can pitch in, and I have some stored in a safe place for a rainy day." Sasuke and Sakura looked at Naruto with some degree of surprise. Considering the way Naruto would eat ramen, the two had thought he'd run out just to feed his usual cravings of ramen. "You actually save your money? Are you really, Naruto? What are you talking about, Sasuke?" "Of course it's me, for crying out loud. And why the shock for learning I save my money? I do, and it helps when I save up when I have to buy other things, apart from my favorite ramen dishes. It's not that we doubt it's you, Naruto-kun, it's just that you don't exactly strike up as the thrifty type at first glance." Naruto thought about that and had to agree with Sakura and Sasuke's words, but he was not that bothered. He got an annual contribution of funds from the Hokage, and he thanked the old man for that money he would routinely give him, and in thanks, he made it a point to store some of the money in a small money box he kept hidden in his apartment, and had other hiding places for any excess money he couldn't store in his box. That was how he was able to pay for any needed supplies and amenities, no matter how high the prices were. He learned this trick very early, and it helped big time. "I guess I have my ways of surprising you guys, but seriously, it's my treat for this day, so what do you say?" Sasuke thought about it, and so did Sakura, and it was then that the raven-haired boy replied, "All right then, I'm in. Let me see if I can contribute something." "Great. We'll meet up back here. See you guys." As Naruto headed back to his apartment, he spotted Hinata walking home and recalled what she had done previously during the exams, and thought about it and decided to thank Hinata for what she had done. He was quite sure that had she been caught, she could have been kicked out and take Shino, Kiba, and Akamaru with her, and he was not in the mood for that. He found Hinata to be shy, timid, and somewhat weird at times, but she was truly a nice person and worthy of being respected now that he thought about it, and despite the fact that he didn't have that much money at the moment, he decided to see if she would not mind coming along with him and the others in his team for their personal celebration. He dropped down and ran up to Hinata and called out to her. "Hinata, wait up." Hinata turned and blushed as she spotted her longtime crush, and she was surprised that he was calling her all of a sudden as she faced him. Ever since Naruto suddenly had grown into this hot young person before her, the shy girl was very much attracted towards him even more. Why yes, Naruto-kun. Hey, I wanted to thank you for doing what you did in the exams earlier, and I'm happy you were not caught. By the way, me and the gang's going to have a slight celebration for making it past the Chunin exams. First stage, you want to join us? I too don't know, isn't it just for you guys? Normally, yeah, but I don't mind you coming along. You also passed, and I think you can celebrate with me, Sakura-chan, and Sasuke. Hinata thought about it and nodded in agreement, while she was utterly giddy at being invited by Naruto out to dinner. Granted, it was not a serious date or anything, but it was certainly the very first time that she would go out with Naruto, and despite there would be company, she would be happy as long as Naruto was with her. All right, Naruto-kun. Hinata was happy and accompanied Naruto his apartment to get some of his stored money, and they made their way to meet up with Sakura and Sasuke. In the meeting hall of the Jonin, Kakashi was sitting down and looking at the window along with Kurenai and Asuma as they awaited the results from Ibiki on how the students had fared in the written exam stage of the Chunin exams. The Jonin in charge of Naruto, Sakura, and Sasuke had no doubts in his mind that the team he led was going to be a firecracker of a team. Sakura, while not as talented as Naruto and Sasuke, possessed a keen mind and intellect, along with excellent chakra control, and she seemed to be the one who kept the peace between the pair. Naruto, with his unyielding determination, guts, and inner strength, was a serious contender, though he wondered how the devices in his body and the Kyuubi would play in this situation. And Sasuke with his Sharingan was another part of the team. He and Naruto, despite their differences, were a good team overall. Kurenai then sighed as she looked at the window. Something up, Kurenai? Nothing, Kakashi. I have no doubts about Kiba, Akamaru, Shino, and Hinata doing well on their own in the exams. It's the second part that's got me a bit worried. Kakashi nodded as he knew just where Anko was going to send the students to, and he knew that it was going to be one heck of a test for the teams. They will be all right. I know for a fact that your team is a full tracker team, and with their abilities, they will do just fine. Kurenai nodded at that, and she then turned to Kakashi. What about your group? Hey, like I told Guy, my team's very unique, they'll do all right. Asuma took a smoke and was next to them and agreed as well. We need to have faith in their respective talents. After all, they were formed because they are able to combine their strengths and offset their respective weak points. It was then that Ibiki arrived with the results of the written exams, and the Jonin looked through the papers before them. Kurenai was happy to see that her team had passed together. No doubt Shino and Kiba had relied on their familiars to help them. With Akamaru helping Kiba, and Shino being supported by the bugs he could communicate with due to his inherent abilities, and Hinata no doubt used her own intellect and Byakugan to help out. Asuma was happy to see that his team also passed, as Shikamaru's true intellect came into play. Ino no doubt used her family's secret jutsu, and Choji would have been supported by Ino. Kakashi was also happy as he saw that Sasuke's paper had good answers and Sakura was also passing due to her own intellect. However, it was then that he noticed the fact that Naruto's test paper was not with them. Where's Naruto's written test results, Ibiki? The special Jonin grinned and handed the sheet to Kakashi, and the Jonin's exposed eye widened at what he was looking at, and for good reason. Naruto had answered all 9 questions perfectly, not a single erasure, and more. The Jonin had a sneaking thought that maybe those machines in Naruto had a hand in the sudden boost in his blonde Genin's intellect, and he looked at Ibiki. Are you sure these are Naruto's test results, Ibiki? As sure as I am that my head looks like a mess without this on me. Ibiki replied in answer as he pointed to his bandana, and that allowed Kurenai and Asuma to take Naruto's test results from Kakashi as Ibiki and Kakashi spoke for the time being on the matter at hand. Both Jonin understood each other's shock, as Ibiki had a list of all the current Genin taking the written tests, and he had dug up Naruto's files from the academy, and he had a sneaky feeling that Naruto would fail and drag the other team down with him, but his test results in the Chunin exams flew in the face of the tests and exam results he had in school. Naruto has gotten all the answers in the exams correct, and I had observed him, Kakashi. He didn't cheat at all. He didn't need to. He answered every question flawlessly, and that makes me very curious. Was his exam and test results in the academy genuine? They are genuine, Ibiki. He's been the last and poorest student according to his school records, as far as I know. Then kindly explain to me how the supposedly weakest and poorest student in the academy not only answered every question in the written exams flawlessly, but he had no cheated at all, because as far as I see it, he either has the ability to see the future in advance, or he's a lot smarter than he looks and is a great actor, because if he is, then he pulled a fast one on all of us. Asuma and Kurenai also thought the very same thing, as they were shocked at the fact that Naruto had answered all the questions in one go. Such a feat was unheard of, especially when they were well aware of Naruto's dismal academic performance back in the academy. They were even more curious about the team Kakashi led. Was there a chance that his team could be in fact a powerful force in the Chunin exams? The next day, Naruto, Sakura, and Sasuke, along with all the gathered genin teams, looked at the fenced-off area of the Forest of Death, and the whole bands of genin couldn't help but feel something very creepy about this place. Anko then arrived as Naruto looked the forest over. This allowed the PD system to initiate a full-level scan of the entire area before it and see just what sort of dangers were present in the forest that could be directed at its user. Large numbers of hostile predatory creatures. Possible threat level to use is considerable at current status. Anko then arrived on the scene, and this time she was early and she looked at all the students, namely one blonde in particular, as she had been able to see his test results, and like Kakashi, Kurenai, Asuma, and Ibiki, she was familiar with the fact that Naruto was once considered as the worst student in the academy, but the fact that he answered the questions in less than 10 minutes and was relaxing the whole time made her curious on whether Iruka had been lying to them, or Naruto was a lot more promising than he looked. As she finished telling them the rules of the second half of the Chunin exams, which was getting the Heaven and Earth scrolls, and those would help them go to the tower that was their destination for the semifinals, to do it in the allotted time frame and to not open either scroll for any reason, she reminded them that since no one knew which team had the other half of the scroll, they would have to fight each other for the scroll or steal it at any cost. They all signed their waivers, and as they were being assigned their scroll, Naruto turned to see Ino and Sakura arguing, and Ino's teammates were also watching the whole exchange. He then turned to see Hinata walking toward him with a shy smile. Yes, Hinata. Naruto-kun. I want to wish you luck in the forest, and be careful, okay? Naruto nodded and smiled, making Hinata blush even more as she reached for something. By the way, here. What's this? Naruto asked as he was looking at a cylindrical object that resembled the container for a rolled-up film or a piece of paper. Hinata blushed and she tried to speak, but being this close to her very handsome and well-built crush was making that part of her plan impossible until Kiba and Shino showed up, and Kiba replied, "It's Hinata's healing ointment, Naruto." Naruto was somewhat surprised. This was the first time someone had given him healing ointment. Back then he would have been wary, as some people had tricked him before and gave him powder that made him itch badly for days, and also some sort of oil that attracted mosquitoes, but this was Hinata here, and she was too shy and kind-hearted to do that to anyone. That much he already knew, so to know she wanted him to have healing ointment was nice. Wow, you're giving it me, Hinata. Why yes. Wow, thanks a bunch, Hinata. This can really come in handy. I got to go, and good luck to you and the others, okay? Naruto took the ointment and shook Hinata's hands, making the raven-haired white-eyed girl blush bright red as she looked at her crush moving back to join his team. Kiba and Akamaru looked at Hinata, and the young Inuzuka smiled. Wow, you didn't faint this time, Hinata. Kiba-kun. Please stop that. Kiba grinned and Akamaru barked in amusement while Shino merely looked on. As soon as the bell rang for the Chunin exams to begin, they and all the other teams darted into the forest as the time started, and Anko grinned as she heard some screaming at the moment and spoke to herself. I guess the games and fun are on. It had been only half a day into the test when Team 7 was looking for both their way to the tower and locate a scroll for their own when the forest came at them with several exploding kunai that separated Naruto from the others. Naruto barely had time as he was suddenly surrounded by a pair of massive snakes. Meanwhile, Sasuke and Sakura were now facing a stranger. The Persona Drive decided that now was the time to unleash the armor to defend its master. Threat level is considerable, armor activation at full. It was then that Naruto was surrounded by a massive glow of chakra, and in a moment the two snakes charged right at the glowing figure, and then if one looked closely, dark black liquid flowed out of Naruto's skin and began to cover him. And one would see Naruto's glowing eyes as the black liquid covered him in a full body suit of black liquid. Anko and the rest of the Chunin examiners studied the bodies and saw that they were the grass genin, but their faces had been removed from them in a very painful and brutal fashion, while the other Chunin were shocked and wondering who could have committed such a brutal attack. The special Jonin knew full well who was the one responsible for this incident and knew that he was back, Orochimaru, her former sensei and one of the Sanin, a former student of their Hokage and one of the worst criminals that came from their village and a traitor to boot. She turned and gave orders for the Chunin to alert the Hokage and send 3 squads of Anbu to help her in tracking Orochimaru down. However, she had felt a massive release of chakra and wondered just what was going on inside the forest. As she made her way into the forest to track down Orochimaru, she wondered just where had that massive blast come from, and no matter how impossible it sounded, from who? In the forest of death. The grass genin looked with interest while Sasuke and Sakura looked on in shock as they gazed at the massive and armored figure that had appeared after ripping through the massive snake that the enemy ninja had been riding on. The grass genin had used a powerful genjutsu on the two as it chased them as they ran in fear, and now it had them cornered, but he moved away as something was coming right at them and it sent the massive snake at the target, but the snake's was suddenly ripped apart with the sickening sound of torn flesh and skin as it faded away, and there was the figure before them. The figure was dressed head to toe in armor. There were areas of pure black material in the joints and the sides of the body that were somewhat exposed. The forearm gauntlets that the two genin recognized as the same Naruto had on back in the Chunin exams were there at the moment, and the hands were once more in their full armor setting, and the upper arms were protected by sections armor that had the same black, white, and red color scheme, and the armor on the shoulders resembled something out of a fantasy armor set but moved smoothly and was smaller in size, but very dense. The chest was protected by a figure hugging that was white and red with black streaks on the rims and mixed with gold. The armor covered the chest gracefully, mimicking the human form at its finest, and the armor was thicker and slimmer, making it highly durable, and there was the symbol of Konoha in the chest in deep blue light. On the back were 3 nasellas, 2 of them were aiming at an angle and on aimed downward, and there was some sort of glowing circle on the back. The stomach was protected by a series of plates that were shaped in the same was the abdominal muscles were, and the plates were pure white edged with red that contrasted with the flexible but highly resilient black inner armor suit. The hips were also protected by some form of armor that had flowing thigh armor and covered the rear and crotch well but did not restrict movement at all. The thighs themselves were covered in pure white and red armor that ended near the knees, and the shins were guarded by greaves that were white and red as well, and the feet were covered in boots that were smooth and well formed. The face was covered in full face armor, and it had a flowing crest guard that moved back on the top of the head, and there was a thick forehead guard that had the symbol of Konoha etched on the surface in glowing blue. The face resembled a classic ninja with slightly thicker cheek guards. There were 3 curving horn-like antennae on the sides of the cheek guards and a visor that glowed blue faintly, and there were 2 glowing eyes in deep blue. Think a fusion of Technoman Blade's armor and that of a Toha's Kara's form, the same kind of armor design of a Technoman, but is slimmer and less bulky, looking like the armor of a Kara's. The perfect balance of power, protection, speed, agility, firepower and more. The grass ninja looked on and spoke earnestly. Who are you? The armored figure turned and spoke in a tone that was human though somewhat mechanical. I should be asking you the very same question. Who are you and what have you done to Sasuke and Sakura-chan? Answer me. Sasuke and Sakura quickly recognized the armored figure as they heard the voice, despite how odd it sounded to them at the moment. Naruto. The grass ninja looked on with wide eyes and gave a smile that spoke volumes of shock and surprise. Naruto. As in Naruto Uzumaki. Well now Naruto-kun, this is a surprise. What sort of costume is that? You know who I am, you snake summoning freak. Sasuke, however, was still under the effects of the apparent genjutsu and spoke to Naruto. Don't waste time with this ninja, Naruto. Get the hell away from this guy. The armored face of Naruto turned to look at his teammate, and despite the fact the armor covered his face, he was shocked and somewhat angered by the way Sasuke was currently acting at the moment. What the heck are you saying, Sasuke? Damn it, Dobi. Just surrender the scroll. There's no way we can take this guy head on in a fight. He's out of our league. The Persona Drive scanned the ninja, already determining just how deadly a threat was this new arrival to its master user. Scanning target. Scanning assessment complete. Subject shows high level of bioenergy. Signs of extensive genetic surgery and enhancements detected in subject, considerable abilities and combat skill levels high. Subject threat level to user, dangerous. Level 3 weapon systems and defensive systems activated and online, lethal payload active and ready for use. No way am I going to hand the scroll over to this nut. Besides, I don't think he'll be content with the scroll alone, Sasuke, and I am going to deal with him. If you're not going to, I don't think you're the real Sasuke. My teammate would not hesitate to attack no matter the odds. Naruto then turned and faced the grass genin and cracked his knuckles a bit more and spoke evenly. I can bet that snake that tried to make me into its meal earlier was your pet, and you are after more than the scroll. If you really wanted the scroll, you could have already taken it from my team and left, but after what I've seen, you're here for another reason and I can bet you're not a real grass ninja. Oh, I can tell that you're not a normal ninja. I don't know who you are, or what you've done to my teammates, but I am going to make sure that you pay dearly for it. The grass ninja smiled and replied in a very mocking fashion. Really? My name is Orochimaru. I was a former leaf ninja, and one of the Sannin, and you say you can beat me. Let me see if you can. Oh, you will. The battle is inspired by the Soul Eater Op Resonance by TM Revolution, a personal artist favorite of mine and one of the artists I listen to when making stories like this one. Orochimaru had little to no warning as Naruto rocketed upwards and still had him in a deadly and fearsome grip, and the S-ranked ninja quickly unleashed his snakes at Naruto point blank, the snakes coming out of his mouth caught Naruto off guard for a second and released his grip on the former leaf ninja. Orochimaru then attacked as he landed on a nearby branch with his fist. The blow struck Naruto's armor on the face, but the blow, while could have sent a normal foe flying, barely made Naruto's own face move as Naruto retaliated with a powerful punch of his own, that sent Orochimaru flying and he slammed hard into a tree and barely recovered as Naruto punched at him once more. The armored ninja's blow slammed into the tree with powerful impact and force as the tree shouted out in destruction as a massive hole was there where the blow landed and Orochimaru moved in and lashed out a powerful kick to Naruto, who merely turned lashed out with a backhand, and then to the Sannin's surprise, the side of Naruto's forearm unleashed a trio of curved blades that extended rapidly and tore his chest with a massive tear being heard as he leapt back, and the two of them landed on the ground as Naruto then made a flicking motion with his hands and then a trio of large and razor-sharp needles appeared from his hands and Naruto unleashed them at Orochimaru. The darts were evaded though barely by the Sannin, at least most of them, as two tore into Orochimaru, one in his left leg and the other in his right shoulder. Orochimaru barely had time to remove the deeply buried needles when the ones he evaded and had buried themselves into a tree suddenly exploded with violent force, ripping the tree and reducing it into nothing but a jagged stump, tear it to shreds and splinters, and the rest of the tree were there. The same thing happened as the darts in Orochimaru exploded with violent force and the clouds from the explosion covered Orochimaru. The Sannin was not dead yet as he leapt outward and was fired some swords at Naruto, but his right arm and a portion of his torso had just been blown off and his left leg was blown apart below the knee. Naruto felt the swords bounce off his armor like they were mere toys as Orochimaru moved back and recovered his limbs through regeneration. However, gone was the arrogant smirk, and Orochimaru's face was replaced by a look of rage and focus. How in the hell has he that kind of power? Those darts were not normal at all. What sort of power is this? Had enough, Orochimaru. Or do I have to bash you into nothing but fine paste? Careful, Naruto-kun, I am not going to be someone you can beat. Really? Could have fooled me, bring it on. Naruto taunted Orochimaru with a come here gesture, and that was enough for Orochimaru to reply with an evil smirk and a glare. Cheeky little brat. The two charged at one another and Naruto and Orochimaru began trading blows, and while Orochimaru's blows were known to be considerable in power, Naruto's were far more devastating. The nanomachines in his body had already augmented his strength and abilities, and when the nanomachines activated the armor system, the blonde's abilities were boosted to greater lengths, and this gave him a deadly advantage over his foe as his blows struck with ever-increasing speed and impact, and Orochimaru's own blows were either blocked by his defensive measures or by the armor, and that began to annoy Orochimaru. Orochimaru launched a barrage of blows such as punches and kicks at Naruto, who blocked and retaliated as well. One kick to the head was blocked by Naruto's hand and he lashed out with a kick of his own. That breaks Orochimaru's regenerated arm and forced him back as Naruto unleashed a strange launcher that appeared on his shoulder, and then a glowing ball of energy appeared and it was launched at high speed and slammed hard into Orochimaru. The energy sphere exploded in a storm of electrical charges that arced all over the Sannin and stunned him for a brief moment, but the charges did their job as Naruto quickly launched a barrage of blows, ranging from fierce jabs to the chest and stomach. Right hooks that smashed Orochimaru's face and body around like a punching dummy, and then a range of low and high kicks that further added the damage. Naruto launched a powerful uppercut that sent Orochimaru flying into the air, and he followed with an explosive burst of his armor's thrusters as they unleashed a powerful burst of energy to propel Naruto into the air. Orochimaru flew up through the canopy like a missile, and it was then that he recovered and tried to move, but Naruto appeared and spoke. Where do you think you're going? Orochimaru barely had enough time to react when Naruto launches a powerful spinning heel kick to his shoulder and sent him rocketing downwards, and he smashed hard into the ground with an explosive blast of rock, debris, and plant life as he was sent smashing through several branches as well. As Naruto landed, out came a massive blade aimed right at his heart. The blonde ninja dodged aside as the blade extended at great length, and he ducked as the blade was swung in a wide arc, and from the smoke came Orochimaru with a vengeance, a sword coming from his mouth, and he retracted blade and then released it from his mouth and was now armed with the blade, and he then attacked at full throttle at Naruto. The blonde ninja dodged and evaded the blows, and while some hit did connect, to the shock of Orochimaru, the strange armor resisted the attacks of the Kusanagi as if his weapon was very weak, as not even a single gash appeared on Naruto's armor. Not even in the areas where the armor seemed the weakest, showing that the black inner suit was just as resilient as the armor plate outside. Naruto blocked another slash with his forearms and then somehow wished he had a weapon. The Persona Drive already had an answer. Accessing melee weapon system selection. // Item 34. Sonic Resonance Twin-Bladed Staff, Sword selected. Naruto felt a strange command, a bit odd but very compelling, telling him to reach behind him, and he did so, and there he felt something, like a handle, and he grabbed it and lashed out at Orochimaru, who watched. As a straight blade with a single edge like a katana used by the Anbu ninja appeared, and he was forced to evade, but he felt a minute vibration for a moment, and to his shock, the clothes he wore on his chest were sporting a deep gash. Not through his body just yet, but very close. He looked to see Naruto wielding a long handle with a blade on one end, almost like a long-handled straight Nodashi sword. Where did that come from? Naruto himself thought the same thing, but quickly guessed that the black gunk also came with this weapon system, and in his helmet he was grinning and he got ready to fight. It was then that another blade seemingly appeared from the other end of the handle and had its edge reversed, making it appear like a double-bladed staff, and Naruto was enjoying this immensely, and he held the staff in the middle to his back and taunted Orochimaru to attack him with a come here gesture. Orochimaru attacked at high speed and lashed out with a powerful slash to the neck, with Naruto blocked with seemingly no effort, as his speed was able to outpace even Orochimaru's own speed as the two traded slashes and thrusts with one another. Orochimaru was credited as the best user of swords in Konoha, and was thus known as a master kenjutsu, but this time he was facing a foe that could match him and more, as he had to defend himself with twice the effort. As the double-bladed staff allowed Naruto to attack him in angles that truly tested his abilities in defense, as Naruto's slashes and stabs were moving at a rapid pace as he was attacking Orochimaru at the aids, and the angles and from above and underneath. Add to that was the fact that Naruto's strength and speed was increasing, allowing his attacks to move with blinding speed and strike with massive power as the two moved back and forth. The greater danger was the fact that the strange blades seemed to hum and vibrate in a very odd and nearly impossible to see fashion, but instead of being foolish, the Sannin and S-ranked criminal was very wary, as he found out that even a tiny nick from the blades could result in gaping wounds, as he had a large number of such wounds on his body, from light grazes from either of the blades. That is a very unique weapon. Somehow even a tiny cut and be horrendous. The vibrations that are on it, no matter how minute, must increase the weapon's cutting power to higher levels, and what's more shocking is the fact that even my sword can't match it. It was true, as Orochimaru could see that his blade was not even denting the weapon Naruto possessed at the moment, and no matter how hard he attacked, Naruto either blocked or evaded the blows easily, making the snake Sannin wonder if this was really the class clown he had heard so much about. This power certainly not from the boy's demon resident. Orochimaru had no time to think about it, as Naruto leapt upward and with a downward slash that he evaded, cut a nearby boulder in half, and with one swing, the weapon of the blonde ninja tore a clean gash on the stone and cut it and the tree next to it in half as he turned and faced him. Sasuke and Sakura were stunned at how powerful Naruto had somehow become at this very moment. They all knew who Orochimaru was, an S-rank ninja criminal who had done horrific experiments on his fellow villagers years before and had been banished and was to be dealt with. However, he was too powerful a ninja to take on alone, and even the best ninja today were rumored not to come close to even giving Orochimaru a challenge, but here was Naruto in a suit of fantastic-looking armor and armed with an array of totally alien weapons and beating Orochimaru severely. Where did he get that much power? Naruto-kun. Naruto then pulled on the handle of his weapon and the weapon split in the middle of the handle and Naruto was now armed with two swords and Naruto attacked once more, throwing slash and thrust combinations at Orochimaru and this was making Orochimaru's attempts at defense even more difficult as the blonde ninja now had two blades to attack with and both could switch their attacking moves quite easily. And Orochimaru suffered a deadly attack as Naruto lashed out with a quick move and sliced off Orochimaru's arm and then he lashed out with a powerful slash that cut Orochimaru in half and the man was sent flying by the blow. But then snakes erupted from the lower and upper body and Naruto was attacked by Orochimaru with more snakes from his arm as he tried to reconnect his body, but the snakes, who had unleashed swords from their mouths were blown away by Naruto's attacks as he shredded them without any worry. And he charged right at Orochimaru as he reconnected his upper body with his lower half. Don't think you can relax yet, Orochimaru. Naruto then had two launchers appear on his shoulders and it unleashed a powerful barrage of the same armor-piercing high-explosive needles at Orochimaru and he was able to flip away but the explosions were deafening as he was blinded by the flash and the smoke and dust. Naruto rocketed out from the smoke and slammed into Orochimaru with a vicious clothesline and that sent the snake-summoning ninja smashing through trees and as Naruto moved with him, the blonde was using his armor's thrusters as he took Orochimaru for a ride and they smashed through trees and even large boulders like a comet and when Naruto lifted up to the air and out of the forest of death's canopy he pushed Orochimaru off as the snake summoner looked. Naruto slashed downward and severed both arms with a clean dual downward slash as they landed back in the canopy. Orochimaru tried to hide as he had to heal but the wounds were becoming fatal, and for the first time in his life, Orochimaru was afraid. Come out, Orochimaru. Naruto looked as the Persona Drive decided to activate its X-ray scanning system as it had attuned itself to locate Orochimaru, and Naruto was briefly stunned when his vision glowed grayish for a brief second. X-ray scanner mode active. Naruto grinned as he spotted Orochimaru a fair distance from him and he shouted, I see you. In a moment Naruto was about to attack when the Person Drive system decided to make it easier to kill the target as sections of Naruto's armor began to open to reveal glowing areas. The glowing orbs then flared as the PD system activated yet another powerful weapon in the arsenal to kill the target known as Orochimaru. Naruto watched as a strange symbol that resembled a triangle with three lines intersecting to lock on Orochimaru. Seeker beam cannon banks primed and ready, firing. In a moment, 28 glowing blue beams of destructive energy lanced out from the weapon banks and Orochimaru had enough time to run as he moved through the forest in an attempt to escape from the powerful and alien barrage but to his shock, the beams were able to make sharp and graceful turns and arcs as he tried to evade them. Whoa. This is so freaking cool. This black gunk in me and the armor beats the Sharingan any day. Naruto thought as he watched the beams pursue Orochimaru and he powered up to chase his foe all throughout the forest. These strange beams, they seem to be able to track me no matter where I go. How can that brat have this kind of power? Orochimaru barely had time to think as he tried his very best to evade the beams tracking him, but they were unrelenting in their tracking of the snake-summoning ninja. It had come to a point that Orochimaru had to ditch his own body. Such a maneuver was a risky one as he opened his mouth and out came hands that were his own and out he came from his own body. His previous body as it was slammed hard by the beams, he looked and thought it was safe, until 6 beams were coming through the smoke and he barely used his snakes to block their attacks in time. The resulting explosion ripped off his arms below the elbow and then Naruto attacked once more as he appeared and slammed a massive kick right into Orochimaru's chest and they too slammed hard into a nearby boulder and the massive stone exploded like it was a small can filled with explosives, sending chunks of stone everywhere. Sakura and Sasuke had recovered enough and had been following the duo as they tore apart the forest of death like two fighting ravenous alpha wolves. After a meal the two watched the carnage unleashed by their armored teammate and from the ashes, Naruto appeared and quickly recombined his swords to their normal staff formation and the blades retracted and he placed the handle back and it was absorbed back into the armor, and with one hand, he lifted the battered and ruined body of Orochimaru and snarled. Now you are going to get your guts rearranged. Not yet. With that, Orochimaru unleashed several more snakes from his mouth and that allowed him to be freed and he lashed out with a powerful bite to stun Naruto. Crunch. Orochimaru grinned but his grin faded as Naruto spoke in a very calm voice. Nice try you freak, but your fangs are not going to work on this armor. And sure enough, Orochimaru realized that his fangs couldn't cut deep at all. In fact, His bite had not even chipped the thin but highly flexible black inner armor suit that Naruto wore. Naruto then grabbed Orochimaru's head and then slammed his other fist right into Orochimaru's stomach, and the impact had made Orochimaru reel as he was released by the blonde. Naruto then jetted forward using the armor's thrusters and then smashed his kick right on Orochimaru's side and sent the S-rank ninja slamming into tree branches at high speed, and the sounds of the ninja's body smashing hard into the trees, and that sent him flying through the forest like a missile, and slamming hard into a nearby boulder, just as Gaara and his siblings arrived. The Sand siblings were moving on towards the tower after Gaara disposed of the waterfall genin that tried to fight him and his siblings, and afterwards, got into a quick argument between him and Kankuro, and with Temari calming them down, they had made their way, but they turned as a blur slammed into a nearby boulder. They watched as a figure appeared and they heard a rather odd voice. Naruto-kun, you are impressive. Even if you are not an Uchiha, you are no ordinary foe. The three turned to see an armored figure appear in the air through the smoke and dust and land before them and the strange ninja. The armored figure was unexpected. Both Temari and Kankuro were shocked, and even Gaara, despite his emotionless facade, backed away as the figure moved with an inhuman speed, and the grass ninja barely had time react as a powerful blow sent him into the rock and shattered the stone with immense force, and then the ninja was tossed aside by Naruto as he fired another barrage of bright blue beams that surrounded the stricken ninja, who screamed out a deathly scream as the beams consumed him in a bright light and it exploded in a massive shockwave, and as the shockwaves faded, nothing seemed to be left until bits and pieces hit the ground, charred beyond recognition. Gaara and his siblings watched as the tall and armored warrior landed on the ground, and there before them the tall figure's face armor began to glow and seemingly become liquid and fade away, revealing that it was indeed Naruto, as the blonde ninja gave a sigh and turned as Sakura and Sasuke came on the scene. Gaara was sorely tempted to fight the blonde ninja and the Uchiha to see who would win in a fight between him. However, he decided to wait for a much better time, and he and his siblings left, but not before Temari saw the armor glow a bit and become liquid and fade away, leaving Naruto in his clothes. It seemed that a lot was going to happen when the second stage of the Chunin exams would start, as the teams began to converge towards the tower, which was the target destination of the mission in order to pass the second part of the Chunin exams. Naruto, however, sat down and gave a sigh as he felt a bit tired. Apparently the armor and the devices in his body had some limitations, as he felt very tired and exhausted for some reason, leaving the now recovered Sasuke and Sakura to guard their blonde teammate as he recovered. This time, however, in the crater where Orochimaru had just been reduced into nothing but ash and was now resting, a white snake that was battered and bleeding red blood moved away, but not before glaring hatefully at a certain blonde. I will have my revenge, Naruto-kun, and you will pay dearly for interfering with my plans. For now, however, Orochimaru had to rest and recover, as his body had been pushed to its absolute limit and he needed to heal and escape. His plans had to be revised for the time being until he was fully recovered. It was then that Anko arrived on the scene, and Orochimaru, barely alive, managed to hide himself and evade capture for the time being.